that? Oh, yeah. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it.
Usually 9:32, right?
Yeah, when we go live. I'm not seeing that we're live on Facebook yet.
We should be. It shows it. On my end, at least, it looks like we're live. I've already.
Okay, yeah, I
Yeah.
see it. Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes it's just a slight delay.
Was I just hearing like a 3-second delay of my audio back?
I didn't hear anything.
You didn't hear that? Okay, it is, and now it's muted, but I shouldn't have been hearing anything from the computers.
Right now, I'm not hearing clean feed. But that. Okay, now. Now we are.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller, and we are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, privatizers are coming for the VA, the ACLU is fighting for free speech in Florence, the machinists in Decatur end their bargaining with the United Launch Alliance, and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the program today, we've got a phone number and the line is open. You can call or text 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week, and we might answer it on the next show. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us online. We are everywhere. You can find anything online, all at The Valley Labor Report. I'm talking YouTube. I'm talking wherever you find your podcasts. I'm talking Facebook, Twitter, all of it. All at The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. You can support the program and become a one-time donor or a recurring donor at TVLR.fm. That is TVLR.fm. We've also got a hat that should be shipping out next week. There was a production delay. We were hoping that the hat would be in our hands by now, but these are the times that we're living in. There was a production delay, and I talked to the print shop yesterday, spoke to them on the phone, and they said that the hat should be at their facility today. Should be at their facility today. They will be attaching, they'll be putting the patch on it and shipping it out next week. So if you haven't ordered your hat, then you're going to want to do that if you want to get it as soon as possible. We bought several extra just in case, but to get your hat as soon as possible, then you're going to need to order it tonight. That way it can ship directly from the facility, because I'll be sending them the addresses. If you don't order it tonight, that's fine. You'll still be able to get it. It'll just be a little bit later because I will have to ship it instead of the people at the facility. So you can do that at tvlr.fm. You can go to our store there. And if you're a member of a union, you should get your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to me for more details on that. So let's go ahead and jump into the first topic of today's show. Privatizers are still coming for the VA, even under the Biden administration. The most recent fight stems from a 2018 law passed under Trump called the Mission Act. And here to explain the situation to us, we've got Daniel Horowitz. He is Deputy Director for the Legislative Department of the American Federation of Government Employees, a sponsor of the show. Daniel, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Hi, Jacob. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad to have you. We appreciate your time. So let's start with this. The VA has made recommendations to the still-to-be-confirmed Asset and Infrastructure Review, the AIR Commission. We'll talk more about why the VA is making these recommendations. We'll talk about the AIR Commission. We'll talk about that later, but the controversy is surrounding the recommendations themselves. So, Daniel, let's talk about that. Let's start with that. What are the recommendations that the VA is making?
Well, a lot of people thought under the Biden administration, the VA would get more favorable treatment than it has in the past. But unfortunately, that is not looking to be the case. And these recommendations to the AIR Commission, as you mentioned, would call for the complete closure of about 20 VA medical centers around the country, as well as outsourcing a number of other services in smaller clinics. So it's really another and potentially catastrophic step in the privatization and dismantling of the VA, which is really the crown jewel of our country's public health care system for veterans.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the fight to privatize the VA, that has been going on for a very long time. And like you said, I think that there was definitely a feeling among advocates of the VA that at least for the duration of the Biden administration, this would be put on hiatus. And unfortunately, that's not been the effect. How is Alabama going to be affected?
Well, it's fortunate in a sense that the VA expects the veteran population in Alabama to increase, and for that reason, they're not calling for wholesale closure of any medical centers in Alabama. But it really gets to a fatal flaw in the law itself. It creates this fast-track mechanism for closing medical centers but it doesn't have any new funding for constructing new ones. So even as we dig down into the Alabama report, there's a call for closing the Birmingham Medical Center and replacing it with a new facility. But any new construction under this law is going to need a future appropriation from Congress. But once a closure has been approved, the closure must start to go into effect within 3 years. So that's a real problem. And even in states where they are not as hard hit, we don't know how that will play out, and we are extremely concerned.
Wow, so the closure is basically, that is slated, and that is not dependent on future appropriations, but any actual modernization, any actual construction, that was not allotted in the Mission Act in 2018, and so that's dependent on future Congresses. What about in places where there aren't, where there isn't even recommendations to rebuild, to tear down and then rebuild a facility, but that the facility is to stay there? Are there still aspects of privatization that are slated to come to facilities that are going to remain?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's a huge problem. So in addition to closing these approximately 20 medical centers wholesale, what the VA is proposing to do is to privatize services at about 40 other medical centers. So often what we'll see is this hollowing out of the services. So right now, they may have full service, they may have emergency departments, inpatient medical, inpatient surgical, rehab programs, and a lot of those will be closed and turned over to the private sector. In some cases, veterans will be sent hundreds of miles away to receive care at another VA, or they may just be sent out into the private sector. And that is also a problem because, frankly, nobody knows how much private sector care is really available, especially after COVID. And even before COVID, the situation was pretty dire in many cases, and it's worse now.
Right. The what you mentioned about not knowing the private care that is available during COVID is very important, because the recommendations that the VA is making is based entirely on information that was collected before COVID on the availability of private care. And even if we didn't have this pandemic that totally kind of rocked the healthcare system, we would be opposing privatization, and we'll talk more about why, just generally speaking, privatization is bad. But in this specific instance, they're making these recommendations on the assumption that care, the availability of care, is going to be exactly the same as it was before the largest pandemic in the history of the world in 100 years. So, talk to us about the disconnect there and why it's an issue to make such large recommendations based on obsolete data.
Yeah, so we've just lived through this huge pandemic. Hopefully it's winding down now. But what we saw all around the country is there weren't enough hospital beds. Patients were being seen out in corridors. Actually, the VA had to step up under its fourth mission and treat members of the public during COVID to save their lives. So is this really the time where we want to come back after COVID and further cut hospital beds after what we've just seen? That just seems like terrible public policy. But let's look at what VA did here. The law goes into effect in 2018, and the VA starts what they call their market assessments. They collect all their data before COVID, look at what they say is the availability of private care, and we can talk later why that's still a problem, but they look at the availability. They base their recommendations on that. We all know what's happened in healthcare. There are huge backlogs. There are shortages of doctors, nurses, and other providers across the whole system, both private and public. And yet, why now come back and base these closure recommendations on data formed before the pandemic? It doesn't make any sense. And that's not just me saying it. The GAO, which is an arm of Congress, the Government Accountability Office, looked at this as recently as February, and they looked in detail at the market assessments that VA had done. And what they found is They're all old, all the data are old, and VA really has no handle on the cost or on the availability or the quality of the private care that they say will replace the VA facilities.
Right, right. And so let's talk about the private care versus the care that you get in VA facilities, because essentially what this would amount to is a sort of voucher program for in places where you're talking about closing facilities, the 20 facilities that are going to be closed wholesale, in the instances of specific services being privatized, being removed from remaining facilities. What's going to be happening is veterans will be forced into the private sector, with the VA footing the bill for private care. And this is bad in two ways: the quality of the care and the cost of the care. Obviously, the quality of the care is the most important thing, but the cost of the care isn't nothing. So talk to us about what is the consensus on the quality and cost of care for veterans in the VA versus the private healthcare system? Because if you're a listener on WVNN, for instance, we're live right now on a conservative talk radio station, and we just went through 3 months of propaganda from the privatization lobby about education, talking about how education would be so much better if only we put more money in the hands of of charter school CEOs instead of funding and building up our public education system. This is something that they've been beating the drum on for the entire legislative session, and so there are going to be a lot of people in the audience that are thinking, oh, privatizing the VA, that sounds great, but that's simply not good. It's not good for veterans, it's not good for the workers at the VA, and it's not good for the taxpayer. So let's talk about the effect that it's going to have on veterans and the taxpayer.
Yeah, let's start right there with the taxpayers, because something I think people agree with, whether they're liberal or conservative, is we want to conserve taxpayer resources. So let's look at what the VA provides versus what the private sector can provide. And Stanford University, there's just been a huge study of this where they looked at the population of older veterans who go to the VA for emergency care. And what they found was absolutely striking. They found that older veterans, hundreds of thousands of them, who went to VA hospitals were 46% less likely to die in VA care than if they went to the private sector. And they found that the cost was 21% less in the VA. And some of the reasons of this are pretty clear. The VA is very expert at treating the conditions of veterans. They've been doing it for decades. And the care is integrated. Veterans can get all their care under one roof, and the care is responsibly administered. In private sectors, the private sector providers are driven by the profit motive. All sorts of unnecessary and arguably useless procedures occur. They make these hospitals look more productive on paper, but it doesn't show in the outcomes. The outcomes are worse. And we know that the private sector, beyond that, RAND has looked at this. The vast majority of private doctors and facilities are not prepared to treat veterans as effectively. Only 2% have the requisite training and skills to treat veterans. So we know this is bad public policy. It's going to hurt veterans. Taxpayers are on the hook either way, whether the veterans go to the VA or to the private sector. Where will they get the best outcomes at the least cost? We know that's the VA. It's been known for years.
Right. And not only, I mean, there's just so much information, and despite, and this is despite the constant attacks on the VA. And there are, we can point to issues, and we can point to real issues, and we can point to real ways that we can make the VA better for veterans. But despite those issues having significantly, markedly better outcomes for veterans than in the private sector, being markedly cheaper for veterans than private sector care, and being and veterans and I'm getting like 4 or 5 seconds delay in my headphones. Okay, it's gone now. I don't know. I'm sorry. I got I got distracted. And veterans express more. They're more happy with the VA than other people are with their private care. I mean, poll after poll after poll shows that veterans are extremely happy with the health care that they receive at the VA.
Well, that's absolutely right. And the mission of the VA, we have to remember, VA has multiple missions beyond serving veterans, which they do better than anybody in the country. But part of their mission is to train future doctors who serve not only in the VA, but in all the private sector. Something like 60% of US doctors get training from within VA hospitals. If we close hospitals and if we close inpatient services, that training is not going to occur. So there are multiple reasons why VA needs to stay and even grow in the current environment. You know, and the other point you mentioned, veterans prefer the VA. So much of the debate over recent years has been about choice, giving veterans choice of care. Well, what's happening now with this AIR Commission is not about giving veterans choice. It's about taking away choice. It's about taking away the choice to go to a VA facility and forcing veterans into private sector, whether that's available or not. You know, one of the benefits of being in VA, if you're a veteran, is that the billing is handled by VA. You may have to pay nothing. You may have to pay a small co-payment. But if you're out in the private sector, who knows what happens? You may be billed directly. If you can't pay, it may ruin your credit rating. All sorts of things that those of us on the private side are familiar with. That's what veterans will be inheriting if they're forced out into private care.
Right. Yeah, that is the VA. That's such a great point to emphasize, that the conversation is constantly when we're talking about the code word for privatization is always choice. It's always choice, which is nonsense. And this is specifically recommending getting rid of the preferred choice of veterans. Veterans prefer the VA. In poll after poll after poll, it is shown that they prefer the care of the VA. And these recommendations would take away 20 facilities. I mean, that's like 12 to 15% of the facilities in the country are going to be taken away, and services at remaining facilities are going to be privatized. And we're getting some pushback right now on Twitter. We've got somebody saying, you're comparing VA with private health care. Do you not know the history of the abysmal, incompetent VA hospital treatment of veterans? And I mean, this is exactly what I'm talking about, Daniel. I mean, people their brains have been pumped with all this propaganda. Some of it is based on anecdotes of real issues, but some of it is made up out of whole cloth, and it's left people with the impression that VA care is worse than private care, and that's simply not true.
The VA has been the victim, unfortunately, of a very well-funded smear campaign over the years to publicize waiting times, other things. But who's looking at the waiting times or the costs in the private sector?
Right.
Where's the real comparison here? We know vets prefer the care within the VA. So I wonder if the commenter on Twitter is a veteran. I have no idea, but we know that veterans prefer that. And the fact is, under all the recent laws, veterans do have choices if they want them. Most of them still want to go to the VA where they can. And one of the benefits of working at AFGE is we work with locals all around the country. And I met with one of the local officers from West Virginia, from the medical center in Clarksburg, which is slated to be completely downsized. And he had worked as a VA policeman there. And what he said is that it happened on more than one occasion that veterans who were either dying or were critically ill had driven to that hospital and had driven past other private sector hospitals that were closer, because even though they were dying, they only wanted to be treated at VA because that's where they were respected and that's where they got the best care.
Yeah. I mean, that's such an amazing testimony. And just tell us that the data that you said earlier about the health outcomes, because I do want to emphasize that, because the impression is that VA care is worse, but the overwhelming data shows that that's simply not true. Can you tell us what you said earlier about mortality rates and care at the VA?
Many groups have looked at this. Stanford's looked at it, 46% lower mortality for veterans that are seen at the VA, lower costs. Rand has looked at this.
46% lower mortality.
That's huge.
46%.
Yeah.
And that's a very large study involving hundreds of thousands of veterans. And Rand has looked at this. They compared side by side VA hospitals versus non-VA. Same story, better outcomes at the VA. Veterans, you have to remember, have more morbidities, more illnesses than the general population.
Right.
Because of their service, because of their injuries. And the doctors and care providers at the VA specialize in this. VA veterans are already feeling pushed out into the private sector by the Mission Act. Costs are skyrocketing, and this air commission process is just going to make it so much worse.
Right. Yeah, I think that's so important. And obviously, so a big part of this is, what is it going to do for veterans? But obviously this is going to be bad for the workers at the VA as well. And it should be noted that the VA is the largest employer of veterans in the country, right?
Yeah, a third of the workers in the VA are veterans themselves who dedicated their careers to caring for other veterans. That's good for the veterans who work there. It's also good for the veterans who receive care, because they understand the problems of veterans, both the doctors and the other staff. The other thing that's important to remember about VA healthcare is that there's coordination of benefits. How many of us have struggled on the private side, working through multiple insurance companies, and maybe in the end up with a surprise medical bill anyway? Well, within the VA, all the care is coordinated, all the records are shared. It's just a more positive experience, and the proof is in the pudding. It leads to better outcomes.
Right. And so this is all happening because of because of a law that was passed under the Trump administration called the Mission Act. Talk to us about the. I was flummoxed when we were talking last week, about the mechanics of the implementation of these recommendations, because it is totally broken. The law was designed with the express purpose, it seems like, of privatizing the VA. It was not, if you look at the way that these recommendations are slated to be implemented, it was not like, okay, Congress is going to see if these recommendations make the most sense. There was not just talk to us about the broken process for the implementation of these recommendations.
It's beyond broken. This is a law that's designed to take a wrecking ball to the VA. So look at how this works. The advocates of this law looked at how the military went around closing bases after the Cold War. It was called base reduction, and it created a fast-track procedure for closing bases all around the country. And for the most part, they were never replaced. But at least in that case, some of the military needs were going down as a result of the end of the Cold War. But look at it like transferred into the healthcare context. So the VA has years to cook up these recommendations. They're working with private equity-backed management consultants with ties to the private sector who work on these market assessments and recommendations. They come out with these recommendations. They go to an AIR commission, Asset and Infrastructure Review Commission, that's unpaid, that has 9 members. And those members, by law, several of them need to represent the private sector health interests, but nobody represents labor, and no healthcare professionals are required to be there. So I think you can see where this is going. And we know a lot of the nominees have deep ties to privatization, to contractors who profit off the VA already. It goes to this commission. They have barely a few months, a tiny budget. They're unpaid, and they're staffed, get this, by VA itself. They look at these recommendations, and the burden of proof is on this poorly funded commission to try to change anything they don't like. If they don't, they have a few weeks to do that. Then those recommendations go to the president. If the president, on the advice of the VA secretary, sends the recommendations to Congress, all Congress can do is vote to disapprove. They have a few weeks to mount in both houses a motion to disapprove these recommendations. If that does not occur, they can't amend them. They can't put anything back. All they can do is vote up or down. If they do nothing, the recommendations go into effect automatically, and the law requires the VA secretary to start closing facilities. So that's what we're up against here. And it's a very strong... Yeah, go ahead.
And it requires the closures, but there is no mechanism to implement the modernization and rebuilding because the funds for that are not appropriated. So the only thing, I mean, it's astounding. This law sets up an automatic process for closing and privatizing services and that's supposedly only part of the Mission Act. That's supposedly supposed to only be part of it, is part of these recommendations, is the privatization and the closures. Part of it is also supposed to be the modernization, but the things that are actually going to help veterans, the modernization, rebuilding, all of this stuff, that takes future appropriations. No future appropriations are required for the things that are going to take choices away from veterans, that is going to take care away from veterans, that is going to further flood the private market. Nothing else is required for that. But the things that are going to help veterans, you have to pass another law. It's just astounding.
Yeah, it is astounding. The appropriations aren't there. The closures are going to go forward. You know, the VA secretary's gone around and said, well, what are you worrying about? We're only closing 3 hospitals. Well, that's completely wrong. They're closing 20. They're privatizing services in 40 more approximately. And there's no money to build any new ones. So he's talking about building new ones based on money that he doesn't have. He's basically writing a hot check to the veterans around the country. And who knows if that check will ever be covered by future Congresses.
Right. Yeah, I would never want to bank anything, certainly not my life, on the idea that Congress is going to pass a good bill. Because that is what you are asking veterans to do in places where in the 12 to 15% of healthcare facilities, of VA healthcare facilities that are going to be closed down wholesale, and in the others that are going to lose services. What you are asking veterans to do is to bank on the fact, bank on the hope, bank their lives on that a future Congress is going to invest in modernization and rebuilding. I would not want to do that. It's just, it's astounding. So, very bleak picture. How can it be stopped?
Well, the first thing that needs to happen is not to confirm the Air Commission. There are 8 nominees out there, and some of them are known privatization advocates. But if there's no commission, the process stops. And while that's not a perfect solution, it's the best solution to this train wreck of a law that we have. Don't confirm the commission. Tell your senators, don't confirm the commissioners. No commission, no closures. The next thing we have to do is repeal the section of the Mission Act that creates this Air Commission. There was a bill to do it in 2019. Senator Manchin, Senator Rounds, bipartisan members of the Senate proposed just get rid of this Air Commission. It's going to harm veterans, especially in rural areas, and that's exactly what it's done. It was very prescient. So we need to repeal that section of law. But the other thing we need to do is we need to fund modernization of veterans' health centers. We need to put money into the system, and if we put in the investments, will get better outcomes at lower costs in the future for veterans. And that's everyone's goal. The other thing is Congress, even while this is going on, Congress is looking at the victims of burn pits from recent wars, overseas where munitions were disposed. And there are 3 million victims of burn pits who are poised to join the VA system if these laws pass. So that would add another third onto the number of veterans who need care. So we need to be expanding the system. We need to be funding it through appropriations. We don't need to be closing facilities. But the first step is stop the commission. Don't put anybody on it.
Yeah, that's great points. And you said that Joe Manchin has introduced or will introduce a bill to repeal the section of the Mission Act that would do this, right?
He introduced it in a prior Congress. We're working. He said a few days ago he would reintroduce it. So Godspeed. We hope he does it.
Right. Well, I really appreciate it, and I want to leave. We'll leave on this just one more re-emphasis on the care, because we're getting another. We don't get we generally don't get as much pushback on this, but we got an email from a veteran just now, who said that he couldn't disagree more with our comments, that he's had a ton of issues, and he got on his wife's health insurance so that he could get a better doctor. And wait times are bad and things like this. And we have not tried to invalidate individual issues that veterans may or may not have with the VA. We recognize that those issues exist, but the data is out there about the overall effect of the overall outcomes of the VA are better, regardless of whatever anecdotes there exist out there. And I don't doubt them in the same way that I don't doubt any anecdote about anything, right? I mean, there's all sorts of good things that you can have bad anecdotes about, but that doesn't refute the whole of the information that we have out there, which is that veteran care, the care that veterans get at the VA is better than the private sector on the whole. And where it's not, you don't make it better by disinvesting in it. Where care at the VA is not as good as you get in the private sector, you don't make it better. You don't make it match the private sector by eliminating the option totally, right? Because what we're talking about is eliminating the choice of veterans to use the VA in places where they want to. And that is the crux of the matter. We believe that veterans should have at least the option to go to the VA where the data shows that they're going to get better care and where poll after poll shows they want to go. And this is not what this bill is going to do. And I appreciate your email, James from Huntsville. I do. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your contribution, and I appreciate that your story is real. Like I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. But this isn't the way to make it better. All right, Daniel, anything else that you wanted to add on that?
This is a bad law that needs to be stopped. And, to your veteran who emailed, thanks for your service. Please don't deny choice to other veterans who prefer the VA. And let's go from there. I think lots of veterans who have spinal injuries, have all kinds of specialized care needs, only want to be seen at the VA. Let's give them that choice. Let's not make them drive hours to private care, fight against bill collectors for months afterwards. That's not the system that veterans have earned through their service.
Yep. Daniel, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. All right, folks. We've been talking to Daniel Horowitz. He is the Deputy Director of the Legislative Department for the American Federation of Government Employees. Really, really good information. A great breakdown of the law, of how broken its implementation is. Just really, really great. I appreciate his time, and I appreciate AFGE for sponsoring the show. So we've got We've got an audience in the Florence, Tuscumbia, Muscle Shoals area. Thank you to the Soul of the Shoals, WZZA, where we broadcast on Tuesday afternoons. And we got some news out of there last week. The Alabama chapter of the National Lawyers Guild, the ACLU of Alabama, and the First Amendment Clinic at Duke University School of Law filed suit on Monday evening last week against the city of Florence and its chief of police, Ron Tyler, asserting that they used the city's parade permit and noise ordinances to discourage protesters from exercising their First Amendment rights. So, I mean, this is just, it seems like every single week, we're coming to y'all with yet another story about free speech in this country. And about how the free speech fight is not on Twitter, or at least not primarily or only on Twitter. If you listen to some people, that's where you would think the only free speech fight in the country is right now, is on social media, and whether or not people can say the N-word in their Twitter posts. But week after week after week, we are coming to you with stories of legitimate government. The First Amendment is I mean, look, we can have opinions about what Twitter should and shouldn't be doing and about what the government should and shouldn't do about Twitter. I think I tend to agree more with conservatives on that Twitter, it is bad that Twitter is so censorious. I think that I tend to agree more with people who have an issue with that. I would lean towards more speech, and I would lean towards a marketplace of ideas, right? That is my predisposition, and so I am inclined to agree with people who say that there's a problem with Twitter and a problem with Facebook, and especially that they have there is a problem with their control over the discourse, with the fact that billionaires are totally unaccountable to the public, and who are totally unaccountable to the public have such a huge, outweighed control over the discourse. I think that's an issue, and I don't think it's unreasonable that we should think about ways that the government should address that. But what I have an issue with is people that think that is the only thing, because we're coming to you, I mean, seriously, week after week after week, where the government is telling people what and when and how many and how loud they can or can't speak or assemble. We're coming to you week after week with stories of bosses threatening people with homelessness by firing them for their speech, for their protected, concerted activity. You are foolish and you are being deceived if you believe that the primary fight about free speech in this country is on Twitter. Since at least June of 2020, going back to this story, since at least June of 2020, protesters with local organization Project Say Something have engaged in peaceful demonstrations and other political activity protesting a Confederate monument located in front of the Lauderdale County Courthouse. Then, following the murder of George Floyd, Project Say Something continued to demonstrate, ultimately protesting approximately 160 to 175 times before the end of 2020. There were no documented incidences of violence or obstruction by Project Say Something at any of these 100-plus demonstrations. Nevertheless, in 2021, Chief of Police Tyler began conditioning permits on payment for unexplained police protection fees, threatening citations, relocating protests to locations with less visibility, and ignoring real threats and harassment from counter-protesters who were not subjected to the same scrutiny. In their press release, the Alabama ACLU asserted that city law enforcement officers have applied the parade and noise ordinances in inconsistent, arbitrary and discriminatory ways, which led to a significant decrease in the number of demonstrations organized by Project Say Something, particularly near the courthouse where the Confederate monument is located. In fact, city officers have applied the noise ordinance so broadly as to even include unamplified human voices, resulting in protesters engaging in at least 10 silent protests to avoid retribution from the Florence police officers if they vocally protested in their intended location. This happened a week ago, and I would be interested. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. Again, that phone number is 844-899-8857. I would be interested if anybody has heard about this on their free speech warrior of choice, from their free speech warrior of choice. I would be interested. Let me know, 844-899-TVLR, if there have actually been people siding with the ACLU in this free speech fight against the government. That would be interesting. We're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. On the other side, we are talking about bargaining updates with the Decatur Machinists Union. We'll be right back. Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
IBW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBW is the right choice.
Energy Alabama is a locally operated and membership-based nonprofit organization focused on advancing Alabama's clean energy future through education and advocacy. Many people in charge of infrastructure and building decisions simply don't know how viable clean and renewable energy is, and to that end, Energy Alabama has provided instruction to thousands of adults and tens of thousands of K-12 students across the state, and they are working hard to build careers in clean energy and help everyday Alabamians save money on their utility bills. Learn more about their work and how you can join at energyalabama.org.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys of Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs are proud to represent working people in Alabama and across the Southeast. They have over 100 years of experience representing injured workers in workers' compensation, personal injury, and disability claims. Let their attorneys help you when you get injured on the job. You can find them at www.mtandj.com or 855-617-9333. Let Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs help you when you get injured on the job. Again, the website is www.mtandj.com or the phone number 855-617-9333. No representation is made that the quality of legal services is greater than the quality of legal services from other law firms. Attention union members, podcasters, members of membership organizations. The future is here, and you need to be prepared for it by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or other organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. You'll also be able to use a union-friendly organization. We use Unionly here at the Valley Labor Report, and they have been very great to us. Their fees are lower than Patreon's, actually. They set up a great store. It's all extremely user-friendly, easy to use. So, folks, if this is something that your organization or you as an individual are needing, if you're needing a way to regularly collect dues from members or supporters of your organization, if you want to set up an online store, then you should start preparing for the future by calling today 206-595-8631. Again, that phone number is 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io. That website is unionly.io.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136 out of Central Alabama. Learn more at ibew136.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, and my co-host is Adam Keller. If you have anything to add, you can give us a call. The phone line is open, 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. You can also send us a text. You can tweet us at Labor Reporters, or you could find our website and send us an email, tvlr.fm. We love the feedback. We love it. Give us all of your feedback, especially positive. I love to be complimented. So, we've got late breaking and local news up right now. The Machinists Union Local Lodge 44 in Decatur may not be headed for a strike. They may not be headed for a strike. A strike looked imminent as recently as Thursday morning. Negotiations were going so poorly, and the sides were so far apart that the local had already opened up picket line shifts. And within 3 hours of posting the picket line shifts up online, there were dozens of shifts already volunteered for. So people were unhappy with what the company was proposing, and so they were getting ready to strike as recently as Thursday morning. Things changed drastically after that, though, with the company, ULA, doubling the proposed wage increases from the day before after they saw that the union was getting ready to strike. So we love seeing that. The Valley Labor Report has been given a first-hand look at the summary of the last best and final offer from the company, which includes a $6,000 ratification bonus, increased minimum and maximum wages. The new maximum wage is $55 an hour. The new progression rates are 25 cents a quarter, $1 a year, and they have general wage increases of 4%, 3.5%, and 3% over the duration of the 3-year contract. So the first year, they get a general wage increase of 4% on top of their $1 a year progression, and then the second year, 3.5%, and then the third year, 3%. On top of that, they are getting increased 401k match from 60% in the last contract to 70% in this contract, and they are getting a $4,000 supplement in the first year to their 401k, a $1,400 supplement in the second year, and a $1,400 supplement in the third year. So also, no concessions on healthcare costs. They got 2 extra vacation days. David, the president, David Story, president of Machinists Union Local Lodge 44, told me that people are pretty happy with the summary, generally speaking. So so we'll see. I think the expectation is that it is ratified, and the union will be holding meetings next week to discuss the contract, and they will vote on May the 1st whether or not to accept it.
That's kind of cool that their vote is on May Day of all days.
That is kind of cool. Yeah.
So, yeah, shout out to the machinist out there. Way to go and being prepared, and really just wishing for much success. Hopefully this will close things up in a positive way, and the members will get what they need. And, appreciate David and everybody else on that negotiating team and everyone who's been organizing there. I know it's been a ton of work. So, but your hard work appears to be paying off.
Yeah, definitely. This is the first contract that the negotiating committee has recommended since 2008. That means in every negotiation since 2008, the negotiating committee has come back to the membership and said, this is bunk. We don't recommend you voting this. And this time the negotiating committee is recommending that the membership ratify the tentative agreement. So we'll see. We'll see what they do. We'll be supporting them here on the Valley Labor Report either way. And this is the benefit of a union, folks, right here. They had an elected committee of rank and file workers, of people that work alongside each other, go down to, I believe they negotiated in Florida, and they spent a week hammering out a contract with their bosses. Pushing back on some things, accepting other things, having their own proposals. That's not something that you can do without a union. Without a union, you are given a contract and told take it or leave it, basically.
If you even have a contract.
Yeah,
It may just be all nebulous
right.
And shift day by day.
And even if you have a contract, it's subject to change at the employer's will. This is a 3-year contract, and meaning that the employer, once the membership ratifies it and this contract is signed, the employer cannot unilaterally change it. If they want to change something during the contract, they have to approach the workers and say, look, we want to open up this article of the contract and we want to renegotiate some things. Maybe, they have to do that. Even if you have a contract without a union, your boss doesn't have to do that. Your boss can just your boss can come in and say the next day, oh, you were making $20 an hour? Yeah, that doesn't really sound right. That doesn't sound right to me. Let's go to 17. And
if you don't like it, you can leave.
But here's a pizza party.
Here's a raffle.
Here's a raffle.
Here's a raffle. And if you work extra hard, you may just win the raffle and get a bag of chips.
Yeah. Ooh, boy. That's crazy.
So, I don't think it's a stretch to say that because the machinists have been very organized and because they are prepared to go on strike, should things not go well,
yes,
that benefits them in their negotiation.
I mean, it definitely benefits because during negotiations, I mean, literally after they put up their picket line shifts, the proposed general wage increases doubled. The company was proposing prior to that only 2% general wage increases, and after the picket line shifts were up, it doubled to 4% in the first year. So
another good reminder that direct action gets the goods. In this case, just credible threat of direct action was enough. And so, again, just send love and solidarity to all our machinist brothers and sisters for the good work they're doing and the hard work they're doing.
Absolutely. So last week, we spoke to Tim James. Tim James is running for governor of the great state of Alabama. We spoke to him last week and played a portion of the interview on the show. The full interview will be airing tomorrow, where you will hear him refuse to say whether he thought America was worse when it had Jim Crow or slavery than it is now when the gays are allowed to walk around freely. So that was fun. We were not able to get to his positions on marijuana. He wants to pull us back to where not only can folks be locked in a cage for recreational use, but also for medicinal use. That's great. Or on gay marriage, he wants to end it. Also great. We love it. No problems there.
Just want to be clear here that Jacob is being sarcastic.
Obviously,
I know sometimes that doesn't always translate across the airwaves. Yeah, it was pretty insane.
Yeah, hot take. It is bad to lock people in cages for smoking dope. That's bad. That is a bad thing that we do as society. And it would also be bad to go back to a place where gay folks don't have the same marriage rights and the benefits that go along with that straight folks do. That would be bad. That would be a bad place to go. And that is where Tim James wants to keep us, wants to take us. However, on the section of the program that we aired, he said he pledged to support the coal miners that are on strike in Brookwood, which is unironically good. That is no sarcasm there. That's good. He said that he would fight to end the injunction and immediately stop the use of state troopers to escort scabs. Unlike the first things, this is good. This is very good stuff from Tim James.
Even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yes, broken clocks twice a day, all that good stuff. However, after the show, actually during the show, in overtime, which you can listen to if you're on the radio, you can find us online, and you can continue listening to us. We go for a full hour and a half after we get off the radio. We continue with the show. So you should find us online on YouTube or Facebook and keep on watching us. But after the show, we got a call from a listener in Decatur, Joe Marshall, and we talked to him. I talked to him further after the call. I talked to some other folks as well, who these people talked to us about what Fob James, who is Tim James' daddy, did in 1980 to striking paper mill workers in Cortland, Alabama. So let's first establish that it's relevant, right? Tim James has never held office. He's never been elected to anything. So when he is talking about his record, what do we have to go on? We have to go on his public statements. We can look to his public statements. We can look to what he's done in business, and we can look to his connections. That's all we have to go on. He does not have a public service record that we can point to. So when he says things, we have to take the sum of all of these things. We have to take into account his connections, his public statements, and what he's done with his business. That's all that we can look at. And let's frankly be real, it's not his business and it's not his policy positions that is giving him a fighting chance at being governor. It's because his daddy was governor. Look, he can't control that his daddy was governor, but let's not be coy. That's why, frankly, that's why he has his business, right? That's why he has his business. That's why he has everything that he has, is because his daddy was governor. That's why he knows the people that he knows. That's why he has the connections to where he's able to raise money. That's his whole life because his daddy was governor. So Tim James' daddy, Fob James, he was Republican through to 1978 when he ran as a Democrat and won the gubernatorial race, which put him in office during 1980, which is when the Cortland, Alabama paper mill strike happened. The mill workers went out on strike mainly over wages. The company was only offering an 8% raise in a year with an inflation rate of 13.5%. Phew, we think inflation is bad now. Can you imagine a 13.5% inflation rate? That would not be fun. I would not enjoy that. The strike lasted for 9 weeks, and over the course of the strike, just like our sisters and brothers in Brookwood, they had a restrictive injunction placed on them, limiting the number of folks who could picket. According to news reports from the time that our internet sleuth David Story was able to dig up, which is really amazing. Like, he sent me these archive articles of what happened of coverage of the strike, which is really cool. According to news reports from the time, the injunction was placed, the injunction that limited the picket line to 3 and then to 2 people at once, was because some rocks were thrown.
Oh.
Oh, no! Oh, no! Rocks were thrown! My God! What are we going to do? What are we going to do? There were some rocks thrown. I mean, get a freaking grip, you crybabies. After a long time on strike, the workers decided to violate the injunction and do a mass picket in front of the gate of the plant, bringing out hundreds of mill workers, their family, and their supporters from the community to bring the company back to the table, because during the course of the strike, the company was refusing to negotiate. Instead of supporting the Alabama workers who were just trying not to get a pay cut, Tim James's daddy, Governor Fob James, sicked the state troopers on them, sending over 100 to the picket line, including a helicopter, to antagonize and arrest dozens of striking workers, despite the fact that they had not injured anybody. There was no accusations of anybody being actually injured during any physical disputes on the picket line, during any of the rock throwing. None of that. None of that happened. And Governor Fob James saw fit to send over 100 state troopers to try to break up the strike, including a helicopter. Ultimately, this was successful as the mass picket deflated, but their message has been sent to the company and they were able to bring them back to the table. Unfortunately, though, the paper mill workers were not able to beat inflation and ended up accepting the 8% offered in the first place. I mean, just imagine what could have happened if the governor of Alabama had stood on the side of Alabama workers instead of a Yankee company. Instead of a company based in Connecticut. They might could have beaten inflation. They might could have at least not taken a pay cut.
And, you know, they would have spent that money right there in their community.
Right.
Their schools would have benefited. The local businesses would have benefited. The county and city governments in the area would have benefited. It would have been a way to improve Alabama from the bottom up. But time and time again, those in charge, those who are the political establishment of this state, see fit to always side with the bosses, side with, as you said, Yankee capitalists, multinational capitalists, these corporations. They side with them as opposed to the everyday people who live in this state, who work in this state, who raise kids here in this state. It's a shame, really, and I think it's important, though, that we bring this history up to show where the state of Alabama will use its force, whether it's 1980 or 2022.
Yeah. I mean, so, look, seriously, though, that Adam is exactly right. That money that the Yankee capitalists would have been paying the people to try to keep up with inflation would have been spent in Cortland. Instead, it went to bosses in Connecticut. And that is what Fob James, who is again Tim James's daddy, that's what he supported. Violently supported. On a brighter note, though, in the next contract, the company only asked for one concession in the contract, and the union said no, and they took it back, and they So there were no concessions in that contract because basically the company said, Joe has told us before on the show that the company said, y'all showed your manhood last time, and so we're not going to ask for any concessions this time. We just want a contract, and we want to keep everybody at work, and so that's what they did. So that's good. But, this is what Fob James did when he was governor in Alabama as a Democrat in 1980. And when he was a Democrat, he was like more liberal than when he was a Republican, because he later ran again and he was governor again from 95 to 99 as a Republican, and he was much more conservative when he was a Republican. And so this is like liberal Tim James, or liberal Fob James, sicking state troopers and helicopters on striking Cortland, Alabama workers. And it's relevant because of his connection to Fob James, who is his daddy, Tim James, his daddy. It's also relevant because we reached out to Tim James's team for comment on this a few days ago, like multiple days ago. It was like Wednesday or Thursday morning that I sent an email to his communications director asking for comment on this, asking if he had, if he agreed with his daddy about what he did to these workers. And they have not responded to a request for comment. So I don't know if I hurt their feelings last week when we talked to them. I thought I was very cordial. I thought we disagreed, and I didn't play coy about some of my disagreements, but I felt like I was respectful. So I don't know why they wouldn't tell me what they thought about this. But so on top of just the connection, there is Tim James's refusal to comment on what his daddy did when he was governor. That is worrying.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you brought this context up because, yes, he said some good things about the UMWA strike in Brookwood and what he would do if he were elected. But here we have a direct parallel.
Yeah.
A direct parallel. I mean, a strike with an injunction, a company that is obstinate and doesn't want to come back to the table. And we see how his father responded. So, talk is cheap.
Yep.
Talk is cheap. And this is a legacy of not just Fob James, but a long line of Alabama leadership of treating our state as like an eternal colony of the U.S.
Yeah.
We are here for cheap labor, less
cheap
educated labor.
Yankee capitalists.
With a hostile environment for organizing and for unionism. So that's, the way that we have been used in this state. And it's a shame that so many leaders from Fob James down to Kay Ivey are eager to sell us out to corporations.
So Tim James, if you just, look, sometimes I am very bad about not getting to emails. So if you or your communications director are listening to this, or somebody that supports Tim James is listening to this, get their campaign to comment. And if you have a comment on this, if you would say, if you have a comment, I'll tell it next week. I'll tweet it out and I'll tell it next week. I'm not trying to, I'm not interested in frankly, this gubernatorial election. I don't know that one way or another it's going to be much. But I liked what he said. He said very good things about the coal miners' strike. And so his comment on this matter is very relevant because that's frankly like the only good thing that he said during the interview. So we need to know where he stands on this. If he wants us to take his commitment to the coal miners in Brookwood seriously, we need to know what he thinks about this. And that's not too much to ask. That's not too much to ask at all. So we've had a great show so far talking to Daniel about privatizing the VA, doing a little bit of local labor history if you've missed any of it. We're on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you get your podcasts, and you can listen to the full show there, or you can catch clips that might interest you. Just search for the Valley Labor Report on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to take a really quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about nursing home unions and running through last week in Southern labor. So stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. Energy Alabama supports consumers and is a leader in advocating for them. They have been able to successfully fight off utility rate increases in the state, reduce fees for electric vehicles, increase electric vehicle infrastructure spending, and they secured a $100 million refund by Alabama Power after the utility overcharged customers for fuel. To learn more about their work advocating for customers and to join the fight, go to energyalabama.org.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBW558.org.
The attorneys of Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs are proud to represent working people in Alabama and across the Southeast. They have over 100 years of experience representing injured workers in workers' compensation, personal injury, and disability claims. Let their attorneys help you when you get injured on the job. You can find them at www.mtandj.com or 855-617-9333. Let Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs help you when you get injured on the job. Again, the website is www.mtandj.com or the phone number 855-617-9333. No representation is made that the quality of legal services is greater than the quality of legal services from other law firms. North Alabama DSA is looking for folks to work for a better North Alabama. They prioritize mutual aid, municipal activism, and union solidarity. Contact them on social media or dsanorthalabama@gmail for more information.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Hometown Action is a proud sponsor of the Valley Labor Report, and we're here to help keep you in the loop on the assault on your right to protest, picket, and peaceably assemble in Alabama. The anti-protest bill is back this year, and it's as bad as ever. There is huge interest in building worker power and increasing unionization in Alabama that has corporations scared. Don't let their influence on our state legislators become another tool to arrest striking workers and union supporters. This racist bill is especially problematic for black organizers and unnecessarily gives law enforcement broad discretion to define even small peaceful gatherings as a riot. Tell your Alabama legislators to say no to House Bill 2. We've set up an easy way for you to do that. You can go to hmtn.link/HB2 where you'll find more information and an email template you can use right from your smartphone. That link is hmtn.link/HB2. You'll also find more info on social media at Hometown Action.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at AFGE.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only Union Talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, and my co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, give us a call. Our phone line is open. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. If That is 844-899-8857. You can leave us a voicemail throughout the week, and we might play it on the next show. And hey, here's a request for the audience while we're still on the radio. I have been trying to get in touch with Phil Williams and Brian Dawson. Phil Williams is an afternoon host, a weekday afternoon host on WVNN, a conservative radio station, and he has a recurring segment that is made specifically to piss me off, I think, called Union Dues or Union Blues. Oh. Where, I mean, it's just, oh, wow, it's fascinating.
I wonder how much Koch brother money it took to come up with that.
Right, yeah. Probably thousands of dollars. And so he's said multiple things that are either like really stupid, just flat out wrong, or, lacking context, just really, really dumb, really dumb things. And so I've tried to get him on the radio. I've emailed him a couple times over the last couple weeks. I've tagged him on Twitter, and he hasn't responded to me. And I don't know if he thinks like that we're not big enough or something, which would be really funny, because he was bragging about how many people listen to him online. And we're not like a particularly large, we don't have like a particularly large online audience, but we have literally a conservative estimate is 5 times more people listen to us online than his show, which is hilarious because, like you said, Adam, his show is backed by basically unlimited Koch brother money from the Alabama polity.
Allegedly.
No, it's not allegedly. I looked it up. The Koch brothers are a confirmed donor to the Alabama Policy Institute. Like that is out there.
Yeah, absolutely. The Alabama Policy Institute.
And Right Side Radio is owned by the Alabama Policy Institute, I believe.
Isn't that something?
I believe. I'm pretty sure that's right. I think it's right, but whatever. He's anyway.
I was going to say, listeners may not be surprised to hear that there are no billionaires and oligarchs who are willing to give us money.
Yeah.
Not that we want it, but we haven't heard from them.
Yeah. So that would be really funny if that's the reason that he's not replying to us, because, like I said, we don't have a huge audience, but conservative estimate is 5 times more people listen to us online than him, based on the numbers that he was bragging about last week. Alternatively, it could just be that he is a tiny baby and is scared and doesn't like to talk to people who disagree with him. That's another possibility. So anyway, we wanted to get him on the show, talk to him about that. His email is phil@rightsideradio.org or info@rightsideradio.org. If you would be interested in our conversation, you should let him know or call into his show 2 to 5 weekdays on WVNN and let him know that you're interested in that conversation. And also Brian Dawson, who is the president and CEO of 1819 News, which is another entity that's owned by the Alabama Policy Institute. And I checked that. It is owned by the Alabama Policy Institute, 1819 News. And they, advertise themselves as like, oh, we're a real news. We take out the fluff and whatever, and we just bring you the straight dope, and our editorials are separate from our news and all this stuff. And that was fascinating to me, because in their interview with the pro-military coup flat earth gubernatorial candidate Dean Odle, they did not mention those things. They just talked to him like he was a normal guy. Like they spent an hour talking to this lunatic like he was a normal person. I mean, props to Dale Jackson, at least, for when he talked to Dean Odle, he just treated him like a loon and laughed him off the air, which is like, I don't often say props to Dale Jackson, but props to Dale Jackson because, seriously, this guy, Brian Dawson spent an hour on his podcast as the president and CEO of 1819 News talking to a flat earther, and a guy who says on his website where he's running for governor that we need a military coup.
Wow.
And they didn't mention it. They did not mention it. But this is a totally serious news organization that is just giving you the straight dope and is like just super normal and has really, really rigorous journalistic integrity.
Clearly.
Super normal. So if you're interested in hearing a conversation between me and Brian Dawson, then you should let them know too. You can, let's see, let me pull up their email. It is, I emailed him too. I only emailed him a couple days ago though, so we can give maybe a little bit more, a little bit more.
He could be in his bunker preparing for the military coup, led by the crazy person he interviewed.
Jesus, dude, it's crazy. Brian.Dawson at 1819news.com. Brian, Bryan Dawson, DAWSON at 1819news.com. Because I'm interested in seeing how he justifies not asking the pro-military coup flat earth gubernatorial candidate about his pro-military coup flat earth views. That would be an interesting thing to know. So I have a lot prepared, a long segment prepared on the Associated Builders and Contractors, which is a non-union construction council of bosses that has endorsed Katie Britt for U.S. Senate. Unfortunately, we are running out of time on the radio, so you're gonna have to follow us online if you want to see that. I've got some really good information, really good segment on the Associated Builders and Contractors because it is a seriously vile group, and Katie Britt is proud to have their endorsement. And basically though, their whole shtick is we want to cut wages for construction workers. That's like the whole thing. That's the whole thing. That's it. There's nothing else. Well, we want to cut wages and decrease safety standards.
Right. Cut regulations.
Cut regulations. That's their whole shtick.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, what could go wrong? So we're going to talk some more about that in overtime. But we're going to go out on the radio with this small bit about nursing home unions. Last week we talked about how sometimes unions, workers having some amount of control over their workplace, sometimes this is cited as a cause for decline in product quality. Sometimes this is cited as a cause for decline in product quality. Of course, it's untrue and it's silly, but it's an accusation that's out there, so we talk about it, folks. We talk about it. And yet another piece of evidence came out last week debunking this idea. Research came out in the Health Affairs Journal last week showing that union nursing homes had a 10% lower COVID mortality rate for patients and a 6% lower COVID infection rate for workers. Why? They say nursing home worker infection rates and resident mortality rates have been linked to nursing home staff being employed in multiple facilities and lacking access to paid sick leave and personal protective equipment. Union nursing home workers are less likely to work second jobs because they get paid well. Union nursing home workers have better access to sick leave. Union nursing home workers have better access to COVID testing, and union nursing home workers have better access to PPE. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking to Josh Brewer, staff representative of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, with a nursing home worker in the South, and I'm excited to hear what they say about this. But during the pandemic, unions literally saved lives. Nursing homes were the center of COVID deaths in this country, and unions saved lives.
That's right.
Over 10,000 people were saved. They had their lives saved by unions protecting the people that they care. They were able to, therefore, what that means is they increased the quality of the product, of the service they were providing, contrary to what weird libertarian debate bros are going to tell you. They increased the quality of service that they were able to provide, the safety that they were able to give their residents, because they were protected in the workplace. They saved lives. So that's a very important story. As we're wrapping up here on the radio, we've got a few minutes left. We're going to do a couple of plugs. Tomorrow, Sunday, April 24th, from 1 p.m. to 8:30, join Spice Radio, Blues to Bluegrass, and the North Alabama School for Organizers as they raise money for the free automotive clinic. There's great music all afternoon. There's a raffle drawing, and of course, great food and brews at Stove House. Live streaming will be done by Spice Radio in Huntsville. The United Women of Color have a virtual meet and greet with Dr. Edwin Bridges on Tuesday, April 26th from 6 to 7:30. Dr. Bridges discusses his book, Alabama, The Making of an American State. He served as the Alabama Department of Archives and History Director for 30 years, and he was co-author of Georgia's Signers and the Declaration of Independence. The League of Women Voters have an environmental education series, The Climate Crisis in Alabama, Impacts and Renewable Energy Solutions. On Tuesday, May the 3rd at 6:30, they'll be joined by Scott Duncan and Daniel Tate to review the causes of climate change and how we can fix it. Friend of the show, Maximilian Alvarez, has started yet another project, The Art of Class War, which will be a regular segment that he will do for Breaking Points with Crystal and Sauger on YouTube. The early bird registration deadline for Labor Notes Conference is May the 1st. The conference is June 17 to 19 in Chicago. You can leave us a voicemail on 844-899-TVLR. Today's the last day to place your order and get your hats soonest. Place your order for the hats. Give us money at tvlr.fm, and that is it for our time on the radio. If you find us online, you can stay tuned for Overtime. We are talking to the host of the United States' only daily union talk radio show, Ed Flash Ferenc of Ohio, and that's going to be it. That's going to be it for us on the radio. We're going to be talking to Ed Flash Ferenc from America's Workforce Radio Podcast, and let's be real, folks. How much value are you going to get out of what comes next on WVNN? Let's be real. Let's be real.
Jump online and
find us online. All power to the workers. All right.
Thanks, everyone who stayed with us.
So we got rid of those folks on the radio. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for staying with us. We've got a great overtime lined up for you. You can still call in at 844-899-TVLR. We're going to take a short break, and we will be right back with Ed Flash Ferenc of Ohio.
Hey, Flash, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey,
awesome.
Great.
Yeah, I can hear you. I don't seem to be getting any Zoom, though, for some reason.
What did
Can you hear
say?
me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you great. Yeah, you sound great.
Okay. I don't see anything on Zoom, though. That's all.
Are you on a computer?
No, I'm on my iPhone.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, you didn't like dial in. You're doing the Zoom link.
I'm on the One Tap Mobile. Wait a minute. Maybe I can do the join meeting here. If it's okay, does it sound okay? I'm okay with this.
Yeah, that we're fine with it if you are.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
We got to
Coming
pay
back from
for
break.
radio anyway. Okay.
Yeah, we'll be back from break shortly.
Okay. And is this Jacob?
This.
I'm sorry. Are you? Okay.
I'll tell how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
Alrighty, folks. Welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio show. We are now in overtime, and we've got some good stuff for you. Ed Flash Ferenc and a lot of Amazon news is on the docket today, so let's get started. Ed Flash Ferenc is the host of America's Workforce. It is the only daily labor radio program in America and has been on the air since 1993, according to their website, which is amazing. Supplying listeners with useful, relevant input into their daily lives through fact-finding features, in-depth interviews, informative news segments, and practical consumer reports. The program airs in Cleveland, Ohio, and is available wherever you get your podcasts. You can find out more on awfradio.com. He's also our next guest. Flash, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Hey, Jacob, thanks for calling me today and being on your report. I'll tell you, it's great to be on in Alabama. We need more unions down there, so anything we can do to make it happen, let's make it happen. Okay, brother?
Absolutely. That's the goal. That's the goal for sure. So, funny enough, you had a whole other career in radio before launching America's Workforce in '93, you were reading the news on like a popular morning show on WMMS out of Cleveland. Is that right?
That's right. I started my radio career back in 1973. And let me go a little bit before that. Back in the 60s, I was part of the rock and roll revolution with the Beatles coming out, the Doors, all the great bands that exploded out of England and then the United States. And I always dreamed of going into radio. I mean, I was just obsessed with radio. And in fact, when I was at high school, Normandy High School in Parma, Ohio, I got involved in the audio visual department. And in my senior year, I did the morning announcements. So I just kept gravitating toward that. And then I went to Cleveland State University, joined the campus radio station. And lo and behold, here I am, a sophomore. With a year under my belt, there was an opportunity to join WHK and WMMS. And the reason for that is because there was some new ownership. They were bought by Mallwright Communications in late 1972. There was a lot of staff changes, which is typical with new ownership. And they were looking for some college kids, like interns. And I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. I answered the phone on a Friday afternoon. He said, "Hey, we want you to work in the newsroom. And when can you start?" I said, "You know what? I could start in an hour if you want." And that was a Friday afternoon. I was there on a Monday morning, and I just want to let you know it was $2 an hour. They did pay me $2 an hour. I didn't have to work for free, but it was a behind-the-scenes thing, and I worked on the AM side. And about maybe a year later, 1974, when I was 20 years old, I was on the air doing news, and the rest is kind of history. If you Google Jeff and Flash, you'll find out, well, you'll see some crazy pictures of us and long hair and doing crazy things. But it was FM radio at its finest. I mean, we took a station which was virtually nothing and turned it into a dynamo back in the 1980s. I spent 21 and a half years of my life. I mean, we're talking a whole generation there, and it made me essentially who I am today. I mean, that's how I got the name Flash. I was the newsman. Jeff was the main guy, and we had characters around us. We did jokes, we did news, we had traffic. It was a full-service morning show. We had governors on, state reps, you name it. We mixed it all up and had a whole lot of fun. And that station, if you talk to anybody in Cleveland or if you go around the country, is responsible for having the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame located in Cleveland, Ohio. And much of that had to do with the management, the staff, to push that forward. And it's just a great venue. If those of you listening, if you ever get a chance to come to Cleveland, you got to check out the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's a great project, and it's always evolving. But that's kind of my history. That's how I got into radio. And then after that, when in '94, when I left there, I did a couple of years in talk radio. And then the opportunity for America's Workforce came up in 1998. So I've been hosting this show. Actually, I've been hosting this show longer than I worked at WMMS. I'm in my in August of this year, it'll be 24 years. It's hard to believe.
Wow. Yeah. That's pretty crazy. And you mentioned if you Google Jeff and Flash, you'll get a lot of stuff come up. And I did that, and and so I've got this. Adam, play this clip for me because it's Jeff when you Flash when you were. It was 83, I think, when this was recorded. So you would have been. How old would you have been in 83?
I would have been 30 years old then.
30 years old. You got the nice beard.
Yeah.
You got your like it was a sweater vest on. I mean, you were really rocking the look. Adam, let's go ahead and play that.
Yeah, and I really, Flash, I hope this clip that you can hear it on your end as well, because it's a fun one.
Go back into time here.
Yeah.
Here. Coming up next on Video Air Checks number 15, it's Jeff and Flash and the Buzzard Morning Zoo.
Thank you very much, Denny.
Okay, now what's this story, Flash?
Listen to this. They're calling it a case of a drug working a little too well.
Doctors in Canada found an experimental antidepressant, mind you, that was causing patients to experience orgasms every time they yawned. Needless to say, this problem was slightly embarrassing for the 2 men and 2 women involved. One man said he was so exhausted he had to lie down for 15 minutes after each yawn.
Pooped him out.
What are you taking for it? Sleeping pills.
Oh, man. Do you remember that? Do you remember that particular story?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what that show was all about. It was crazy news. We would pick up little tidbits. Sometimes we would produce them up with sound effects. There used to be a time on the show, we call it a stinger story at the end of the newscast. I would try to find a song that would correspond with the story. And it was a nice way to blend everything on the show. We often called, not just the morning show, but that whole station was the soundtrack of the city. And you have to keep, and I said this many, many times on interviews throughout the years, you have to understand Cleveland, Ohio. I mean, I was born and raised in Cleveland. My dad was a steel worker. An uncle was a steel worker. I had several that were Teamsters. I grew up in a union family, and they all had good jobs. I mean, jobs where a father can support the entire family, so his wife could stay home and raise the kids. I mean, there was a different time in America, and but that was instilled in me. And when things started changing in Cleveland, we saw, and I'm sure you've talked about this on your show, with jobs disappearing, manufacturing disappearing, jobs going to Mexico, and Mexico jobs going to China, race to the bottom. I mean, it's been going on for decades now. That's when Cleveland was pretty much referred to as the Rust Belt. So we saw that decline. And it's interesting to note that. I mean, we noted that on the show and all that, but with that decline, rock and roll, and I mentioned the Rock Hall, kind of became a passion. I mean, we would pack the old Cleveland Municipal Stadium with what we call the World Series of Rock with 80,000 people. We would go to concerts were a big business, and that kind of took everybody's mind off the depression of the job situation. And so it was kind of fun to be there. It was sad to watch what was happening, but we filled that void. And that was, I think that was a big part of the success of MMS, because like I said, it was a soundtrack of the city. We knew what was going on. We had to come back and make people in some way appreciate the city. And we did that with rock and roll. And it really worked. You talk to anybody in Cleveland, they'll remember that.
Well, and you did that with rock and roll, and you also did that in a way that in the production of it that kind of respected the legacy of the community that you were in. This was a union set, right? Y'all were represented by SAG-AFTRA.
Yeah. I joined the union. You had to join the union in order to be on the air. When I first got in the station in 1973, I was behind the scenes, but the way the contract read, if you're going to be on the air, you had to be in AFTRA, which was the American Federation of TV Radio Artists. And some people, young people, said, "Oh, why do I have to do that?" And I said, look, listen, I grew up in a union family. The benefits are going to come down the road, believe me. And when I left the station, well, they had new owners. The first thing they did was bust the union. And we saw that throughout America. But about 10 years ago, the Screen Actors Guild, and AFTRA, because of that, there was a lot of, obviously, finances kind of hit AFTRA. And you saw a lot of mergers, not just in corporations, but unions too. And SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, and AFTRA kind of reached out to each other, and they joined forces. So now it's called SAG-AFTRA. And I always joke, I said, I'm in the same union as George Clooney. I just don't make as much money as him.
Yeah, well, that's what was it? What were some of the, you said that was a union set that was, that you had to be part of the union to be on the air. Were there other radio stations at the time that were not union that you could look to and you could say, oh wow, we've definitely got this better? Or was everybody union at the time, and so it was difficult to see the benefit until the union was defeated, basically?
Well, there were just a few other stations at that time that were union, and honestly, I can't recall which ones, but when they were bought out, more likely than not, the new owners would go non-union, and that was just the case. MMS was an anomaly in so many ways, with the fact that we had ownership that lasted. They sold that station in 1992. I mean, for 20 years, Mallright Communications kept the union intact, and we built up a nice, obviously, equity in the union. And frankly, I'm collecting my union pension right now at 65. I came to term with that, and I'm collecting that now, and it's going to just continue to go up, because when I started the labor union show, and keep in mind that the labor union show is not part of any radio station. It's recorded at a radio station, a non-union station, but it's what's called, and probably similar to, you're on a podcast, but what has happened in radio, they have what they call brokered shows, where you buy an hour, buy 2 hours, and you see a lot of financial planners, people like that usually grab that time and try to sell their wares. And that's kind of what America's workforce was and still is. We've just expanded with the podcasting, which is going to be 2 years come June. And that's why you know about the show now. Right. Because podcasting is the biggest thing happening in America. And I want to share with you some numbers that I just got from our production people, that America's workforce, I mean, we're growing every month. And that just shows you there's a need. There's a need. We have good content. We present it well. It's presented in a radio station style, and which makes it a little bit different than other podcasts. But right now, I mean, there's a lot of podcasts in America, keep that in mind. But right now, we're in the top 10 to 15% when it comes to downloads of podcasts in America. And I'll tell you, in a 2-year time, that's pretty darn good. And I have to credit BMA Media for expanding it. I mean, we got Apple Podcasts, Google, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, and Stitcher. And that's just a couple of them right now. There's 6 of them, and it's expanding as we go. And more people. I mean, we contact people all around the country. California, I might say, is one place where we're getting a lot of response. Union-friendly state, I get it. And politically crazy state, I get that too. Maybe that's why, I don't know. But it's fun to monitor what's going on, to see where we're picking up. And we're trying on a daily basis. I mean, we record the show Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we're trying to go to various parts of the country. We've hit Alabama a couple of times. We hit Florida, and we're going into those right-to-work states to try to spend to get the union message out there. Texas is one. We hit, we were with the Georgia State Federation. Charles Fleming was on a couple of weeks ago. He was really good. I mean, there's an interesting state,
right?
Politically and in so many different ways, especially now with the Marjorie Taylor Greene's case before that administrative law judge. I mean, I don't know where that.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, y'all have a very similar. I mean, it's basically exactly the same kind of format as we have, because we do that on a few different stations. We buy an hour and a half on WVNN in Huntsville. We buy an hour on WZZA in Muscle Shoals, and then WHIV in New Orleans gives us an hour for free. And then we also upload it as a podcast and do it on YouTube as well. So a very similar format there, and actually we have some of this. One of the same sponsors, AFGE, sponsors both of our shows, and I liked your reading of their copy so much that I had them ask you if it was okay if we just played your ad. So we've actually got your ad running on our show, and so our sponsors help us stay on the air, as well as listener donations. And you've been in Alabama a few times, or you've talked to people from Alabama a few times, and you talked to Bart Maddox from the Ironworkers last week. A couple months ago, you talked to Bill Blackman from the Ironworkers, or from the Electrical Workers in Birmingham. They're a sponsor of the show. And we just got in the chat, Jeb Miles, who's with the Ironworkers Local 477 in Muscle Shoals, said he is slated to be on May the 4th. So that's really cool. And you actually, the Electrical Workers have in Birmingham, they have a really cool thing that they just finished, actually, which is the city council in Birmingham passed a responsible bidder ordinance at the urging of the electrical workers mainly, but some of the other trade unions as well. And your interview with the IBEW is the only news that I can find about the responsible bidder ordinance passing. I mean, I've had him on my show to talk about the same exact thing. And I was in preparation for the interview that we did with him. I was trying to look for some information about it. None of the local news stations were talking about this. There was nothing on it except Ed Flash Ferenc in Ohio talking about what's going on in Birmingham, Alabama. It's crazy.
Well, that just shows you the void out there. There is a ton of stuff that the people are not acquainted with. And you know, much of that, if not all of that, is because of deregulation. I mean, how many shows were carrying like the late Rush Limbaugh? Mm-hmm. Or you've got the networks. I mean, it's just, you've got the religious aspect, but it's hardline conservative. And there's very few areas that talk about working class issues. Right. And I could speak to this here, when I talk to people and the first thing out of their mouth is, God, I love your show. I didn't know that. I'm not hearing that anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And it's sad. It's good that we're doing that and we're getting a response, but it's sad that not more people are doing that, because there is a craving for that. And there's so many things in America. If you don't mind, I'll share with you something. We have Tim Coleman is a great guest. You should get him on your show. And he comes from the Sprinkler Fitters Union, mm-hmm. which is affiliated with the United Association. And he's on a mission. And actually, this is a great idea, because I told you about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame at NMS. And back in the 80s, we were the activists for that to happen. That was an uphill battle. It took almost 10 years for that to happen. And when we were announced, when Cleveland was announced in 1986, it still took 5 years for it to happen. So radio, in its heyday, always was a medium that moved the needle. And with the dilution of, you've got so many stations, you got 500, 600 cable stations, you don't have 3 VHF stations. There's a lot of choices out there, and a lot of it is occupied by outlets that really don't help workers. Let's be honest. Right. I mean, that's the situation. But radio can be used in a way to make changes. And I bring up the Sprinkler Fitters because this is unbelievable. New York. Okay, can we agree that New York has pretty good union density? Especially compared to states in the South. We can agree on that, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Did you know that New York is one of 5 states where sprinkler fitters don't have to have a license? Wow. Go figure. Go figure that. Right. And you're talking when you have a sprinkler fitter, and look up the sprinkler fitters, go to the UA. There's a apprenticeship program that is unbelievable. Sprinkler fitters, I mean, these are people that are saving lives when you think about it. The sprinkling systems are in schools, in hospitals. And if they're not done, if they're not installed correctly, we're talking about lives being lost. And there's documentation on that. The UA has been following this for a long time. And Tim, he's been on the show a couple times. In fact, I had one of the sprinkler fitters just this week from Chicago, Illinois. Illinois is another one that doesn't have laws like that. Again, union-friendly state. Why? So anyway, what Tim's doing, he took the show and he took the links, he edited them down a little bit so they're not easier to send by email. He sent it to every legislator in New York, state, Senate, I mean, all levels of government. He sent it to the governor's office. I mean, he loved what we did, and he set it up. And it was just, we had individuals, not just Tim, but we had other people on the show talking about the fact that they lack licensing. But this is what needs to be done. And I come from that old school where you can make a difference. And we always say unions make a difference. And you guys know that. I mean, look at the difference in salaries. Look at the difference in pay. Pensions. Come on. I mean, did you know like half of America does not have a pension?
Oh yeah.
I mean, come on. let's start bringing those topics back instead of all this political craziness that's going on, and talk about issues, bread and butter issues that are affecting people.
Right. And even
so anyway, I'm sorry, I'm on a soapbox here. Can you?
Oh no! I mean, it's a good one to be on, because I mean, even some of the places like that's supposed to be that if you're completely right about the proliferation of right-wing media and the subsidization that like oligarchs and billionaires give it, because the extent to which it actually adds value, in kind of a capitalist sense is probably pretty minimal, but they're getting the message out, and people on, it seems like unions and people on the left seem less willing and able, of course, because there are less billionaires, but the extent to which we have people that can give resources, it's difficult to do things that do actually talk about working people's issues. And even some of the places that are supposed to be, if you listen to the people on right-wing radio that are supposed to be like the left or what, MSNBC, CNN, NBC, all these people, we have one in Alabama, the Alabama Political Reporter. That's ostensibly, if you listen to right-wing radio, you're going to think the Alabama Political Reporter is a socialist, communist thing, right? And so let me just read you a piece that is in their news section. That it was a report. They did an article about the Associated Builders and Contractors endorsing this person for Senate. Okay, so this is just supposed to be a straight news article saying these people endorse this person. Listen to some of the stuff that they put in here. The merit shop philosophy is a belief that the free enterprise system, uninhibited by government, overregulation, or interference, provides the best opportunity for qualified, hardworking individuals to excel in their craft. It is a competitive way of doing business that encourages fair play, economic growth, and job creation. It is a principle which, while focusing on safety and workforce development, rewards personal initiative, skill, and drive to succeed. At the end of the day, the merit shop way of thinking creates opportunity rather than focusing on entitlement, something the country could learn from. This is in their news section, Flash.
Yeah.
This is supposed to
really
be
sad.
like this is supposed to be the Democrat operative people doing the news in Alabama.
Yeah. No, it's way out of line. Way out of line. You have to understand, we live in a PR world today. You ever see the movie Cheney that came out a couple of years ago about the former vice president? There's a good, I think Frank Luntz was the guy. He was a speech writer, and he also crafted their talking points. And you heard talking points. And I'll tell you, especially right wing, they do a darn good job at that. They really do. In that movie, they'll take something and they'll make it palatable to workers. And one of them was the death tax. They refer, when somebody dies and there's an estate and there's a tax on that estate, so they called it a death tax. That's just got everybody riled up. And it's the use of clever words that get people's attention, even though it's not for their best interest. No. And it hurts the economy in various ways. And it happens all the time. I mean, tax cuts. How many times have you heard, they cut taxes. I mean, I get that, but it'd be nice if they cut taxes for the right people.
Right.
But that's not done. It's always the people at the top that
speaking of cutting taxes, Alabama still taxes groceries. We still tax groceries.
Really?
We're one of only like 9 states that still tax groceries. And there are some people that are trying to repeal the grocery tax in Alabama. But do you know what they did instead in this last session?
What?
They passed another business tax cut for bosses.
Yeah.
We've got people paying
and,
10% on groceries, and we passed another tax cut for bosses.
Right. Well, remember when they floated the flat tax? They wanted to dump income tax altogether and do like a 17% flat tax. And we all know, I mean, the flat tax of groceries, we know who's affected by that.
Mm-hmm.
It's so sad. It's so sad. But again, you know, we're talking about these things because we don't have good people in office. We certainly don't have a majority of them to make any difference. We got a tax on voting rights, and there's so many states that are technically one-party states. Ohio, I can speak to Ohio. I live in Cleveland all my life. Ohio was a swing state. It no longer is a swing state. It's a red state, and it was a lot of this came, I want to say, back in 2010. This was Obama gets elected in 2008, and then you know what happened in 2010. There was a big, and the same thing that's happening right now because Biden got elected. And we see these right-wing governors, Kasich in Ohio. You saw Scott Walker in Michigan, Snyder in Wisconsin, Snyder in Michigan. Rick Scott was the governor in Florida. Now, Florida was already right to work, but Wisconsin, Michigan went right to work. I mean, these were union states. Wisconsin, come on.
Right.
And again, okay, let's use that term right to work. Doesn't that sound pretty?
Yeah.
Hey, I should have the right to work.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't mean a federal job guarantee, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, again, we get back to those talking points and how they sell. They're actually selling words and ideas that hurt workers. That's what's going on. And that's part of the PR thing that has happened. And that did not exist decades ago. And it works. Just like political advertising works, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you should see what's going on in the Senate race here in Ohio. We've got like 4 or 5 Republicans going after Rob Portman's seat, and they're just chewing each other alive. It's amazing. It's kind of fun to watch at the same time, though.
Oh yeah, we've got the same thing here. People tripping over themselves about who loves Daddy Trump the most. I mean, it's really, you know, for a party that ostensibly values like manliness and you know, rugged individualism, they are just so incredible. Like, I couldn't imagine anybody, you know, like I could not imagine tripping over myself to fawn over another person in the same way that these people are doing to Donald Trump. Like, even if I liked them, like, you know, I was a supporter of Bernie Sanders in 2016, but I'm not going to, you know, trip over myself to be like, I'm the most Bernie like, it's just so weird. It's so weird. And you know, so all of this stuff that you're talking about, I mean, this is why you decided to start to do America's Workforce starting in the 90s, right? I mean, so that you could kind of platform these issues so that people could understand what's at stake in elections, and so that people could understand how to make their lives better in between elections too. Because, you know, when you're talking about unions, when you're talking about organizing your workplace, like, you don't have to have anybody's permission. You don't have to wait for an election. You don't have to wait for the boss's permission or a politician's permission. You can just go out and do the thing and make your life better. And that's like that's cool as hell, I think. And so, you know, you can talk some more about, but is that basically why you wanted to do the switch from, you know, kind of the general morning show to a straight war talking about unions like every day?
Well, it evolved. Let me be honest. There was an opportunity. We in '97, the talk radio thing. We worked on a 50,000 watt station, and they had a format change. And in fact, I worked with my partner that I worked with at MMS, Jeff Kinchbach, and they decided to go in a different direction. So I was doing some voice work, part-time work here, and somebody that I worked with at one of the stations at a sister station of it was 3WE. This is now WTAM. You could probably even get it down there. It's a 50,000 watt powerhouse at night. But again, it's formerly a Clear Channel station, now iHeart, very far to the right. But there was this opportunity that came upon me and it said, hey, can you fill in for me? And I did it. I liked it. And then that person went on to another station, and I had the opportunity to do it, 5 days a week. We did it live back then. It was at 7 a.m., 7 to 8 a.m. And then in 2000, I got a day job, and there were some format changes at the radio station, so we decided to record it in the morning, and then it airs from 4 to 5 p.m. on 1490 WERE. It also streams live at newstalkcleveland.com, so you can get it down there on a daily basis. But if you don't mind, I want to go back a little bit. 1993, there's pivotal dates, and as you well know, there are certain dates that I think we need to call attention to. And oddly enough, the year that I was born, 1953, was the highest year for union density in America.
Mm-hmm.
It was like almost 35%. Think about that. More than one out of three workers in America belonged to a union. That was 1953. And you had FD. And how did that happen? Well, let's take a look. FDR, union friendly. Truman carried that legacy. Eisenhower, even though he was a Republican, started a federal highway system, put a lot of construction workers to work. I mean, there was a lot of things that were very union friendly. And when that density happened, there was a certain amount of time where the corporations say, oh, okay, slow down here. We got to stop this. And we saw the erosion step by step, mostly in manufacturing. And that started in the 70s. And then it accelerated. Boy, the game changer was 81 when Reagan fired the air traffic controllers. Mm-hmm. Pivotal year. Because that gave a green light to corporate America that, hey, you know what? If you want to get rid of your union, you can do it because I did. And it happened. It happened. Now, let's fast forward to 93. What happened in 93? Clinton signed NAFTA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you heard all the stories. People saying, hey, this is not a good idea. And sure enough, we saw jobs disappear. So what do? We do it again. 2001, when we normalized relations with China. And since then, I just talked about this on the show yesterday. China alone, the Economic Policy Institute, did some numbers on this, and they just went from 2001 to 2017. 3.8 million jobs went to China. That's how many jobs went to China. And why did that happen? Well, you know what? It happened because they had a lot of help from the Democrats. The Democrats, right. Clinton signed off on it. The Democrats, and here's part of the reason for that. Union density went down. By the time I talked about 1953, 35%. And I don't know, I don't have the numbers in the 90s or 2000, but it was probably, I would say, between 18 and 22%. And today in the private sector, it's like 6 and 7%. The only density that's strong today is in the public sector, and that's why they're attacking public sector unions. That's right. About 30%, where it was back in 1953 for everybody. But the Democratic Party got a lot of help from unions. Well, guess what? They can't get that anymore because unions don't have the strength. They don't have the financial resource. So where do they go? Corporations, corporate right. America. That's why you saw them sign off. That's why a lot of Democrats, people realize, okay, if you're not going to be on my side, I'm going to find somebody who is. And if an opposite party person, speaking about a Republican, is going to talk the talk and walk the walk, and that's how Trump got elected when you think about it. What did he talk about? I'm going to bring all the jobs back. Well, guess what? They bought it hook, line, and sinker. So that's kind of in a nutshell what's happened here in America if you go back almost 50, 60 years.
Right. And it's been so, the the part that the Democratic Party played is really, is really shameful to the legacy of FDR and the people that did support unions in the Democratic Party, and even when unions were able to help them more than they can now, they still, I mean, Clinton, we're talking about unions were a lot stronger back then. Jimmy Carter was the one that put in place the plan to implement the changes or to fire the air traffic controllers, and then Reagan just went through with it. So like it's just really amazing how that's what happens when you have a party that's supposed to represent workers and bosses, I guess, is that, the Bible says you can't serve more than one master. You'll go to love one and hate the other. And the Democrats by and large have grown to love the bosses, unfortunately.
Boy, you're not kidding. Hey, here's a little tidbit. I didn't realize this. I did some research for President's Day. And, everybody talks about FDR, about unions. And sure enough, I mean, the National Labor Relations Board was created under that administration, Social Security, all good things for workers happened. But he didn't like public sector unions. I don't know if you know that. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
He didn't. He didn't like them. He didn't think they should exist. Private, yes. But he didn't like public sector unions. So it's kind of interesting. And you fast forward to today, Biden, he'll go for it all. He's very pro-union. I just wish that there would be, and there's so many things that he's got to fight now, plus the crazy war, that things like the PRO Act and things that would help people. And again, where are we? I mean, who's stopping progress right now? Democrats.
Right.
Democrats. Guy by the name of Joe Manchin. We got the two people over in Arizona. It's Democrats. Those are the ones that are stopping everything, which is so frustrating.
It is so frustrating, and basically the bright spot in the Biden administration has been the NLRB. We spoke to, you mentioned public sector unions. We spoke to an attorney at the NLRB in Birmingham a few weeks ago, Joseph Webb. He's the president of the NLRB Union Local 10 here in the Southeast, and he talked about. We got him on after that report from Dave Jamieson at the Huffington Post about the NLRB's funding issues. And, he talked to us about one of his other fellow union members at the NLRB who explained that Republicans are much more passionate about destroying the NLRB than the NLRB is, or than the Democrats are about saving it. And so we've seen since 2014, Obama, Trump, and one budget from Biden flat funding the NLRB, which amounts to a 25% cut in their funding, as we're seeing more union elections, more organizing, more people, more ULPs being committed, and so the people that are tasked with enforcing all of labor law are being left to hang left to dry on the vine, and by Democrats and by Republicans. It's really.
You can take that to other government agencies, and one that stands out is OSHA. And I call attention to OSHA now because, this week coming up, next Thursday, is Workers' Memorial Day. And that was created, and believe it or not, that was created in the Nixon administration. And if Nixon were alive today, he would be, and probably Reagan too, they'd probably be kicked out of the Republican Party. They're too liberal. I mean, at one point, Nixon wanted to do a universal health plan. And there was a fight because I guess
he wanted to implement universal basic income, actually.
Really? Okay.
And don't forget the EPA.
These are ideas. They would chase them. They would burn the house down if that happened today. I mean, it's amazing. But OSHA is another one. I mean, how many inspections are taking place in workplaces today? The inspection usually doesn't happen until there's some tragedy. It's just like the bridges that collapse. They'll say, well, this bridge is not good, and then it collapses. Oh, we should have known about it. Well, you did. You just didn't do anything about it.
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous what's out there, but we don't have enough inspectors. We don't have enough people at the labor board. And it's just been a slow erosion over the years. And it's sad because you're talking about people's lives.
Yes.
I mean, the statistics on at least 5,000, 5,200 people every year go to work and don't come home at the end of the day. They get killed on the job. And then literally tens of thousands die because of exposure to hazardous chemicals, asbestos for one, silica dust. And these take a long time, maybe 20, 30, 40 years, and then they end up as court cases, and then you know how that turns out. I mean, by the time you see any kind of adjudication, the person's dead. I mean, that's what's going on. There's, we have gotten better. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it definitely made improvements, but we have a long way to go. We really do.
I remember doing a segment, I think while Trump was still in office, about OSHA, and that they had, I can't remember the numbers, but it was something absolutely insane. Like only one in every 5,000 reports were even investigated by OSHA. I can't. I mean, take it with a grain of salt but it was an insane number under the Trump administration. And it's just absolutely. It's crazy. Flash, I am really enjoying the conversation, but I want to be respectful of your time. I said 30 to 45 minutes, and we're already going a little over. So, but I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. We'll have to get you on the show again. And we'll leave you off with this. Do you have any advice for us and for folks across the country who are doing, labor podcasts, labor-friendly radio shows, things like this, as somebody who's been doing it for over 20 years?
Well, two things. Content is king. If you have good content, eventually they're going to find you. Now, there's a lot out there, and it's sometimes hard to find. The other word of advice, social media. And I bring that up. You know what's going on at Amazon. You know what's going on at Starbucks. The bottom line, especially, and these are people that are organizing without the help of big unions. It's amazing to see the grassroots effort, the rank and file effort that's going on. You know how they're doing it? Social media. They have found ways. The guys, this is a great story, and I'll be brief. I don't know if you followed the Amazon Staten Island at the warehouse. They went down the halls there at the warehouse, and they found the union busters. They saw which were getting paid $3,000 a day.
Right.
They got their phones out. They captured the video. They tweeted it out. Don't talk to this person. It's a union buster. And there was one where these guys are clever too. They had a good-looking gal that was a union buster. Nobody knew that until she was exposed. In fact, they were hitting on her. They said, "Hey, don't talk to her. She's a union buster."
Yeah, I remember you saying that on your show.
Everybody ran away and said, "I ain't going to talk to you." But social media is the wave of the future. And we use it at BMA to get we even sent out social media on Friday, yesterday, to promote your show today. So social media if you know how to use it, it can be so effective. It's being used in organizing as we speak. So I think that's my best advice. Keep the content strong, promoting. One thing at WMMS, what we did, we had great content, and my program director will swear up and down on this, 50% product, 50% promotion. If you don't have that promotion to go with that good product, it ain't going to happen. Simple as that. I want to leave you with that advice.
Flash, thanks so much again. I really enjoyed the conversation. We'll have to get you back on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, and let's do it again.
All right, folks. Go listen to America's Workforce if you're not already. For some reason, it's really great. They've got new interviews out every day. You can find them wherever you get your podcasts.
And I appreciate you, Jacob, for turning me on to it. I mean, I would have never known, and knowing that folks like Jeb right here in our community are being interviewed by America's Workforce Radio. It's really cool. It's great stuff, and so it's something that, of course, we want to learn from on this program, and I hope that they pick up some Alabama listeners.
Yeah.
Because, as Flash mentioned, they are interviewing union organizers and officials and rank and file workers from across the country, including the Southeast. I know you shared something with me the other day from AFT, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's great to see that. And I think, we've talked about this on the show a little bit, the growth of alternative, pro-labor media. And, I'm glad that we're playing our little part in that. I'm happy to see what Flash is doing with AWF. And really, I think it's something that's promising. I know there were some kind of depressing aspects to our conversation there, talking about the deindustrialization and, the neoliberal turn in this country, the decline of unions. But the positive thing we can talk about is how just in these last couple of years, we have seen an explosion in pro-labor media and an explosion in actual new organizing happening in places like Amazon and Starbucks. So I think those things bode well for us as a movement. And the more we can all support each other, promote each other, and collaborate, the better and stronger we'll all be.
Absolutely. I mean, seriously, I found America's Workforce like 6 months ago from the Labor Radio Podcast Network, which we are a part of. I was like, I had run out of content to listen to. I was hungry for some new content, and I went to the Labor Radio Podcast Network. You can find them at like laborradionet.com or something. I don't know. Google Labor Radio Podcast Network, and there's like 100 different shows that are all labor radio stuff. So that's where I found him, and I've listened to basically every single episode since then. It's such a great show. So we got somebody on the Facebook who said, "No wonder that Phil Williams hasn't contacted us. This is a hilarious show." So I told him that he could call after Flash got off, and so now Flash is off. So if you're still watching us on Facebook, Mister, then feel free to call now. While we wait, though, let's talk about the ABC. The Associated Builders and Contractors. I really hate that I wasn't able to make time for this on WVNN. We've just got so much. There's so much to talk about. But this is really good stuff here. So Katie Britt is running for U.S. Senate here in Alabama. Right now it's a three-way race between her, Mo Brooks, and Mike Durant. Katie Britt is another one of those folks who has also not responded to a request for to an interview request. Which, like, I don't know if these people have actually watched interviews that I've done with people that I disagree with, but I think I am a very nice guy, even if I disagree with you. I think I'm very nice to talk to, even if we disagree. All I want to know, I just want to talk to you. But they're scared. That's what I think. So what is it that makes her viable? She was chief of staff for Richard Shelby and was president of the Alabama Council of Bosses. Those connections have earned her the endorsement of several other councils of bosses, as well as the big council of bosses. But she's earned several endorsements from smaller councils of bosses, like the Council of Retail Bosses, the Council of Restaurant Bosses, the Council of Car Dealer Bosses. I mean, I'm endorsed by a used car salesman. Great. Council of Forest Bosses, Council of Farm Bosses, Council of Factory Bosses, and the Council of Construction Bosses. That list alone should scare the hell out of you if you are not a boss. But let's say it doesn't. Let's zero in then on the Council of Construction Bosses, the Associated Builders and Contractors. We can say that their views are at least somewhat reflective of Brit, seeing as how she told the right-wing propaganda outlet Yellowhammer News, "I am proud to have the endorsement of the Associated Builders and Contractors Alabama chapter." Okay, so I think we can establish that their views are relevant to Katie Britt. I mentioned this with Flash, but I just want to take this chance to really quickly point out the drivel that the Alabama Political Reporter said in their article about the endorsement. They said the merit shop philosophy is a belief that the free enterprise system, uninhibited by government overregulation or interference, provides the best opportunity for qualified, hardworking individuals to excel in their craft. It is a competitive way of doing business that encourages fair play, economic growth, and job creation. It is a principle which, while focusing on safety and workforce development, rewards personal initiative, skill, and drive to succeed. At the end of the day, the merit shop way of thinking creates opportunity rather than fostering entitlement. Something that the country could learn from. I mean, this is from the Alabama Political Reporter. I mean, this is supposed to be ostensibly like the Democrat thing in Alabama, the Democrat version of the news, the Alabama's MSNBC, liberal media. Amazing, astonishing. I
guess they just reprinted the press release, more or less.
No, they did. That's like that wasn't in the press release.
Oh my God,
that wasn't a quote. There was a quote from the press release, but that was the prelude to the quote in the press release.
I suspect I could probably guess who the author of the article is, but I'm just going to leave that alone. But
I have no idea, honestly. I have no idea who the author is. It's said by staff. So I don't know who is responsible for the staff articles, but if you're out there listening and you work for the Alabama Political Reporter, blink twice if you're being held hostage. I mean, my God. The Associated Builders and Contractors, though, they were founded in 1950 because the bosses thought that the workers were getting paid too much. And that's basically the whole thing. So let's talk about the next that's basically the whole thing, though. Their mission as an organization is to drive down wages for workers, to train them less, and to make them less safe on the job. That's the whole thing. The primary way that they lower wages is through fighting unionization. They promote non-union construction, things like this. And we know here on this program that unionization and collective bargaining raises wages for working people. Another way that they attack wages of construction workers is through their training, if you could call it that, where the building trades unions have multi-year training programs aimed at creating a genuine professional craftsman with all the skills necessary to perform in their trade, spending more than any university system in the country, approximately $1 billion a year spent by the trade unions at no cost to the apprentice, at no cost to the government. Where the building trades unions do that and pump out thousands of trained professional craftsmen every year, the non-union ABC contractors, their training is job-specific, creating workers that can only do one job without any other marketable skills. They spend next to nothing. They get government subsidies because they train people in partnerships, oftentimes with local colleges. And they charge their apprentices for the honor of being trained by them. I mean, it's a scam, like we've said on the program before. But let's say that you're not convinced by this. After all, the ABC says on their About Us page that we believe the merit shop movement is a movement for the betterment of the individual, the construction industry, and the nation. So here, the ABC is saying, look, guys, this is not training workers well. this is how we better the individual. This is the way to do it. Providing them with less knowledge. And if you've been poisoned day in and day out by nonsense on TV and the radio, maybe you take the bosses at their word that they actually care about you. And that, left alone, they will actually treat you better than if you grew a backbone and stood together with your sisters and brothers on the job and demanded better. Maybe you believe that because that's what the bosses want you to think. But there's data on this. Like we can simply look at the result. So let's do that. An Illinois EPI study titled Union Apprenticeships, the bachelor's degree of the construction industry. We talked about this on the show. A couple of months ago. But let's revisit some of that information. The labor market outcomes of union construction workers are competitive with workers with college degrees, while non-union construction workers are only on par with workers with high school diplomas, meaning that they may as well not have gotten any training at all. That's what you get from a non-union apprenticeship, is nothing. Literally freaking nothing is what you get. Where union apprenticeship programs get you the equivalent of a bachelor's degree. Union construction workers earn $58,000 per year on average, which is 46% more than non-union construction workers. $39,700 a year. 89% of union construction workers have health care, compared with just 55% of non-union construction workers. A 34% difference. Among all workers with associate degrees and bachelor's degrees, average incomes range between $48,000 to $68,000, and private health insurance coverage ranges from 84 to 90%. So we can see there that a union apprenticeship, union construction jobs, are on par with bachelor's degrees. Let's go to another study by the UC Berkeley Labor Center. We also talked about this a while back. They showed that they evaluated the effect of non-union construction jobs on the welfare system. They found that nationwide, 39% of families of construction workers are enrolled in one or more safety net program at a cost of almost $28 billion per year, and 3 times as many construction workers as all workers lack health insurance. 31% of construction workers lack health insurance compared to 10% of all workers. Nationwide, construction workers' families are overall 28% more likely than all working families to participate in one or more means-tested safety net program. These families are 36% more likely to be enrolled in Children's Medicaid and 38% more likely to be enrolled in the Earned Income Tax Credit. There's a record here. We're not simply out in the wilderness just pondering our abstract ideas. That's not what's happening. We're not out on a limb. There are data out there. These different things have been tried. Different modes of production, different modes of organization have been tried, and we can look at the results. We can look at the results, and that's what the results of non-union construction bosses are. They pay workers less. They less often give workers health care, and they pay them so much less that we end up subsidizing them. Other workers end up subsidizing these bosses' low wages through our welfare programs that we give these poor workers.
And Jacob, the dark irony here is that organizations such as ABC then turn around and demonize these very same welfare programs and use that as their political rallying cry, and, of course, go on to endorse candidates such as Katie Britt and others who do the same, who run against these sort of welfare and social service programs, as meager as they are, and use that as a political cudgel. So they are creating creating a demand for these social services which they then use as reasons to give them more power to elect them into the office, so they can then attack these same social services. It's twisted. Yeah. And the other example I have, because I was just really thinking about this morning for some whatever reason, it was on my mind, and to me it really is comparable to how the very same people who demonize abortion so much and focus on getting poor, often less literate folks convinced that abortion is this evil and they should never entertain the idea of an abortion. So they often, you'll find teenage pregnancies are covered by Medicaid. We've mentioned on this program how about half of all births in Alabama are covered by Medicaid. Mm-hmm. So you have these right-wing forces who convince people, no, you can never have an abortion, that's evil. So the people who could benefit from that option don't even consider that option. Instead, they give birth at 16, 17 when they can't afford it, or maybe they have multiple children that they can't afford, yet they have more children because abortion's not an option for them because they've been told it can't be an option.
Right.
They then rely on these very same social services that are the subject of their political campaigns that are used to divide and conquer the working class, because we know that is one of the most prevalent ways we are divided and conquered, is by demonizing people who rely on food stamps or demonizing people who are on unemployment when they create these very conditions.
Yeah. I mean, exactly right. So the Associated Builders and Contractors, long-time project, but they've been hitting it really hard recently to bring down workers' wages, is attacking project labor agreements. What are project labor agreements? We talked to Eddie Mitchell on the show about this. He is a business agent for the Iron Workers Local 477 here. But just to recap, they're agreements in which the customer, oftentimes the government, but not always, they're agreements in which the customer makes prior agreement to pay union wages and benefits, follow the higher standard for safety that unions set for the duration of the contract. Non-union contractors are allowed to bid on project labor agreements. All they've got to do is follow the rules. That's all they got. They don't have to become union. Their employees don't have to become union on all their other projects. All they've got to do for the duration of this contract is pay union wages and follow the union safety rules, which give people more money, obviously, and create more safe working conditions. Because on union work sites, I can't believe that I didn't think to bring this into to look up the numbers on this. But union work sites are significantly safer than non-union work sites. I believe that the number is something like there are 30% fewer deaths on union construction sites than non-union construction sites. I can't say that's the official number, but it's a number something like that. It's funny that I forgot to, or that I didn't think to bring that in, because I still prepped a whole lot. I was thinking yesterday about looking at the 25,000 words that I had in my Word doc and thinking how much easier being a radio show host would be if I was just like a right-wing blowhard and didn't care at all about being correct about anything.
Wow, it's like doing research is actually a little harder than just pulling it out of your ass.
Yeah. But the number is something like that.
But, I can tell you the construction unions, at least, which is what we're talking about, 19% less likely to be cited for health and safety violations, and on average had 34% fewer violations per inspection.
There we go.
And that's a pretty recent report there with Safety and Health magazine.
Yeah. And so I said many times the customer of project labor agreements is the government, but that's not always the case. So the Toyota Mazda facility, actually just down the road, is a project with a project labor agreement, and Toyota, which is a non-union company, entered the PLA over the objections of the governor, actually. Governor Kay Ivey did not want them to enter a project labor agreement because she doesn't she doesn't care about Alabama workers? I don't know. But why did Toyota, which is a non-union company, why did they enter a project labor agreement? Because higher wages, safer working conditions ensure a better product.
Now, they don't want their actual, folks on the line building those Toyota vehicles to join a union, but they are smart enough to know that union labor built them a better facility.
Yep. President Biden recently signed an executive order stating that all federal construction projects over $35 million would have PLAs, and the anti-worker Associated Builders and Contractors did not like that. Let's see what they had to say on Fox Business.
So President Biden signed an executive order that requires something called project labor agreements on federal construction contracts greater than $35 million. And project labor agreements result in increased costs and discourage competition for more than 87% of the construction industry. So the result of this executive order is it's going to steer contracts to unionized contractors and union labor at the expense of taxpayers. And we know that project labor agreements increase the cost of construction between 12% and 20%. So that means we'll get fewer roads, schools, bridges, and utilities that were funded through the infrastructure bill earlier this year. So this is a real lose-lose policy for taxpayers and the construction industry. Our members are furious with the administration over this, and they hope that they'll reconsider the policy, and the policy will be replaced with something that will support fair and open competition that will encourage all Americans and all construction companies to compete for this taxpayer-funded construction work.
So, Ben, give me a sense of how many non-union contractors are being essentially, put out of work by these rules. Is it a large percentage?
Well, it's hard to know exactly because the final rule hasn't come out yet on this, but we know that our members perform 50% of large-scale federal construction contracts in the last decade. So they are going to be severely impacted by this, depending on the size and scope of the contract. And that's bad news. When you have your best firms building roads, schools, and bridges, and they're not allowed to compete on that, obviously that's going to increase the cost of construction. This is another inflationary policy by the Biden administration.
Does the rule essentially create a closed shop? Are there no non-union companies allowed to bid?
Non-union companies are technically allowed to bid on project labor agreement jobs. However, the terms and conditions of project labor agreements force contractors to hire most or all of their employees from union hiring halls. They have to follow union work rules and pay into union pension and benefit programs. And non-union workers will either have to join a union or unfortunately have to pay union dues as a condition of employment. So the result of this is that non-union contractors will not compete and not participate in the competitive bidding process.
Well, there you go. He does all this, like 2 minutes of crying, just absolutely bawling about project labor agreements, claiming, they raise the cost, which is not really true when you account for the fact that non-PLA projects go over budget and get behind schedule more often, talking about how it kills competition. And then at the end, after just like a simple, the most common sense question that a news anchor could ask, which is, are you saying that like you can't bid on PLAs? He admits it. He admits that he can bid on PLAs. He admits that non-union contractors can bid on project labor agreements exactly the same as union contractors. All they got to do is freaking pay your workers. And you don't even have to pay your workers on all your projects, just for the one that has a project labor agreement. Just like literally for one project, pay your workers. That's the only condition of having a project labor agreement, is for one project, for this one project where you're going to be getting millions of dollars from the federal government if you are awarded the project. For this one freaking project, pay your workers, give them a pension, and follow safety rules.
Right. Yeah, I think it's not a lot to ask that if taxpayers are funding a project, that the workers involved be paid a living wage, that they have benefits, that there are safety regulations in place so that not only are the workers kept safe, but the public is kept safe. both during the construction and once it's finished and we use the bridge or the road or whatever it may be, and the fact that the people who are doing this work are well trained and know what the hell they're doing. That's not a lot to ask, and it's very low hanging fruit. It's something that I'll give credit to the Biden administration for doing that, and even something this modest, attracts this kind of opposition. And I couldn't help but laugh when he said something about their best firms. Best in what regard? Because it's not best in terms of the safety that you follow on the job. It's not the best in terms of the quality of workers you have with training. It's not the best in terms of how you pay people. So, is it the best because you have the highest profit margins? Is it the best because if you're the CEO, it's the best? Because I'm guessing he's not really talking about normal people who have to work for a living.
Right. Yeah, no, of course not. This is something, paying their workers well, making sure they've got good benefits, following rules that will keep them safe. That's something that they cannot abide. So they just simply don't compete for project labor agreements because they can't stand the thought of paying their workers a wage that will keep them off of welfare. Like that, the thought of doing that is so foreign and repulsive to these people that they will take their ball home and walk away sooner than they will try to apply for a project that would give them millions of dollars. And these are the people that Katie Britt is proud to have the endorsement of. So do with that information what you will. If you have anything to add, we've still got the phone line open. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also text the program at the same number. You can leave us a voicemail throughout the week if you're listening to us on the podcast. And you can send us an email on our website, tvlr.fm. All sorts of ways to get in contact with us. Let's go ahead and hit Last Week in Southern Labor really quick, though. We weren't able to, yet another segment that we were not able to get to during the main show. So Last Week in Southern Labor is a segment that we do every week where we go over what happened last week in the labor movement in the South. We talked to, we get the information from Jonah Furman from his newsletter, Who Gets the Bird. You can read it at whogetsthebird.substack.com, where he compiles this for basically the whole labor movement in the United States. It's like everything. It's really, really exhaustive and lots of good information, so I recommend reading it. In new organizing, in one of the biggest single weeks for the Starbucks workers, a whopping 526 workers at 20 stores in 1 week filed for elections with Workers United, including in the South in Covington, Georgia, Durham, North Carolina, Birmingham, Alabama, and Newport News, Virginia. 105 drivers for Martin Brower, which handles McDonald's food supply chain, are organizing with Teamsters Local 391. 70 truck drivers for Cisco in Louisville, Kentucky, are unionizing with Teamsters Local 89. 35 workers for Packers Sanitation in Fort Worth, Texas, are organizing with UFCW Local 540. 14 workers who make talc for Magris Talc in Houston, Texas, are organizing with the Boilermakers. K-12 educators in Richmond, Virginia, are voting on whether or not to make the Richmond Education Association their official collective bargaining organization. The REA has been around since 1900, but now that the school board has legalized collective bargaining under a new state law, educators have to vote on whether REA should officially be handling negotiations. In Charlottesville, Virginia, teachers and support staff are one step behind Richmond, presenting a resolution with majority worker support to the school board to also legalize collective bargaining. in election wins and losses. 62 workers who manufacture plastics for Celanese in Cantonment, Florida, joined IBEW Local 733 in a 34-19 vote. 9 baristas at Three Brothers Coffee in Nashville, Tennessee, voted 5-2 to join UFCW Local 1995. 18 drivers for Lind Gas in Farmers Branch, Texas, decertified Teamster Local 745 in a 5-8 vote. And flight attendants with Avalo Airlines, a small low-cost carrier that operates out of a couple dozen airports, have officially unionized with AFA-CWA under the National Mediation Board. In strikes and bargaining, Starbucks workers in Raleigh, North Carolina held in action outside their store protesting the targeted firing of worker leaders. 300 nurses with the D.C. Nurses Association struck Howard University Hospital in D.C. for 24 hours. A couple weeks back, the Teamsters came close to striking the Red Cross across the country, but reached a tentative agreement. Apparently, that was just for the Teamsters, though, as the other unions are still putting out petitions for a fair contract. There's an interesting fight in small town Georgetown, South Carolina, over the fate of the Liberty Steel Mill there. Steelworkers Local 7898 is hoping to avert a move by the city to permanently scale back the operation of the mill, which currently employs 60 or so workers, and to honor an agreement that would have increased the number of mill jobs to 150. Apparently, the fight goes back to the beginning of the pandemic, when the mill was forced to shut down and is now being contested as having been abandoned. And Adam, the NSO had a win in Florida?
Yeah, that's right. We've covered on this show that at times unions can behave like bosses. It's disappointing whenever we see folks in our own movement treat their employees the way the bosses do. So we had a great win by the National Staff Organization and their Florida affiliate down in Collier County. The Collier County Education Association is an affiliate of NEA. It's a teachers union there. And they were just hit with a ULP that they're having to post at their office that was filed by the NSO. Basically, the education local there was mistreating the staff and union busting their own staff. So shout out to my former union, the NSO, and my brothers and sisters down there in Florida for fighting the good fight and hopefully educating these educators that if you're going to be part of the labor movement, you need to act like it and don't union bust your own employees.
There you go. There you go. So let's take a look at Amazon. One of the reasons that people say workers at Amazon need not unionize is because they've got it so good. Never mind the fact that union warehouse workers make significantly more money than they do. And never mind the fact that having a say in your workplace is just something that every single worker should have by right. And never mind the fact that if you work on Easter, this is how you will be rewarded. Thank you for coming in on Easter Sunday, a message said at an Amazon warehouse. Thank you for coming in on Easter Sunday. We are going to run a contest for P2. Anyone picking over a 310 rate, which is no doubt extremely high, I really don't know, will be entered in a raffle for a snack pack. Entered for a chance to win a snack pack, which is a water or soda and a candy. This is what the message said, and a candy or bag of chips of your choice. Good luck, everyone, and thank you. I mean, I feel the freedom there with the opportunity to get a candy. I don't know why.
Wow. I mean, how generous of them. One of the most powerful, wealthiest corporations on planet Earth and they're giving away a bag of chips
or
a handy to a lucky winner. Wow. How generous. I mean, treating workers like that, why would they ever even think about needing a union?
Right. Yeah. And
they could get a candy bar. Maybe, I mean, if they work really hard on a holiday and they're the lucky winner, they could get a candy bar and a soda on Jeff Bezos's dime. How generous of them.
I mean, like a raffle for $2.
I mean, this would be embarrassing if this was like even a small nonprofit or a small business with low margins. It would be pretty embarrassing to do this. But coming from Amazon, it's I don't know how the workers there felt about that when they walked in and saw it, but I can certainly imagine how they felt about it because I know how I would feel about it.
Yeah. In addition to that slap in the face and all the other things that we just mentioned, Amazon is an incredibly unsafe place to work. A new report from the Strategic Organizing Center gathered information about the injury rates at Amazon facilities, and it's bad, folks. It's really. I mean, it's just like, I don't know how else to say it, really bad. Workers at Amazon warehouses are not only injured more frequently than in non-Amazon warehouses, they are also injured more severely. In 2020, for every 100 Amazon workers, there were 5.9 serious injuries requiring the worker to either miss work entirely or be placed on light or restricted duty. This rate is nearly 80%, almost double, higher than the serious injury rate for all other employers in the warehousing industry, which is 3.3 per 100. I mean, 6 injuries per 100 workers in 2020. That's almost like a 1 in 20. That is higher than a 1 in 20 rate, right? Isn't that higher? That's higher than 1 in 20, which is, I mean, I don't know how many of y'all have ever played D&D, but I've played D&D, and you get and in D&D they have a dice, a 20-sided dice that you play for chance things, right? And if you get a nat 20, it's really good, and if you get a nat 1, that's really bad. Like if you roll a 20 or you roll a 1, that's really bad, and that happens like a reasonable amount. It's not all the time, but everybody who has ever played D&D has rolled a nat 20. So, I mean, this is just, it's astounding. That is an insane rate of injury. Absolutely insane. In 2020, Amazon workers who experienced lost time injuries were forced off work for an average of 46.3 days, which is, that's crazy. That's crazy. That is the average time that you lose if you're injured at an Amazon warehouse. Is a month and a half. That's a week longer than the average recovery time for workers injured in the general warehouse industry, and more than 2 weeks longer than the recovery time for the average worker who suffered a lost time injury. I mean, this is, it's really, the report is a lot. There's a lot of really good information in there. I would recommend folks checking it out because it really underscores the necessity of organizing Amazon, because Amazon clearly does not care about their workers. They don't care about their workers. And so workers are going to have to change it themselves. And they're doing that. They have won a union election on Staten Island with the Amazon Labor Union. They came very close in Alabama, of all places, in Bessemer, and they've got the Amazon Labor Union begins voting on Monday for another Amazon facility in New York. So we'll see. Hopefully this takes off. Amazon isn't taking that lying down, though, and they are trying every trick in the book to keep workers down, including illegal tricks like firing workers for organizing. The NLRB reinstated a worker who was fired for organizing. And because it's against the law to do that, and so the NLRB enforced the law. They had Amazon reinstate this worker at the Staten Island location in New York, and the House GOP Education and Labor Committee was really upset about that. Let's throw that statement up, Adam, if you could. They were really upset about that. Let me pull up this statement because it's just, oh man, it's so funny. Sorry about this, guys.
I've got it if you want me to...
No, I got it now.
Okay.
So the NLRB, this is a statement from Virginia Fox on the GOP House Education and Labor Committee. They tweeted this statement saying, the title was, "The NLRB keeps playing footsies with unions." They keep playing footsie with unions, as if that's a bad thing. And the statement reads, "The NLRB is being used as a cudgel to allow the Biden administration to advance an agenda that hurts workers and job creators by intervening in the recent case of a terminated Amazon employee who openly harassed a fellow coworker." Oh, wow, that sounds bad. "The NLRB has proven that it will put union interests above ensuring that employees remain free from harassment." Now, of course, this worker did not harass anybody. They were just supporters of the union. And so they were fired, and the Republicans were very sad about that. And the Twitter account for People for Bernie, they basically translated the statement. We can put that graphic up now. And they titled it, "Virginia Fox cries about the NLRB doing its job even though she spent all those years defunding it." And the statement reads, "The NLRB, wah, 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 Biden administration, wah, 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 workers, wah. By wah, Amazon, I'm crying about it, wah, I'm sad the NLRB has wah. Wah, wah, no." Representative Virginia Fox. And that's, that's basically...
pretty accurate depiction.
Yeah, that's about as substantive as the original statement, I would say. That's about as substantive as the original statement. So all of this union busting that they're doing, though, the union busting that Amazon is doing, and that the Republicans in the House of Representatives are crying about the NLRB slapping them on the wrist for, all of this union busting is subsidized by the taxpayer. Who was it in Jacobin that wrote that article, that really, really good article? It was Matthew Cunningham Cook and Julia Rock. They point out that, of course, and everyone knows this, Amazon, every time they build a facility, they get millions of dollars in taxpayer subsidies, and nearly all of those subsidies stipulate that Amazon must comply with the law. And so now an attorney for the Amazon Labor Union has filed a complaint asking the New York's Democratic Attorney General to investigate whether Amazon has violated labor laws and thus nullified its eligibility for subsidies. So that would be pretty good.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Way to go, ALU, for pursuing that little thread.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wouldn't have even thought about that.
Yeah, I think that's great, though, to expose the ways in which Amazon and so many other companies are subsidized by the public, by the state. And as we've discussed, like with project labor agreements, the state can put strings attached to that kind of subsidy, which is better than none at all. No strings at all, unfortunately, it seems to be the kind of Alabama way, but we'll see what happens with this New York case. That's very interesting.
Yeah. So one more thing that I wanted to, and then we'll wrap up. We'll wrap up after this last story because it's something that I've been meaning to get to for a couple weeks, and we've been running out of time. So this is a follow-up on something that we talked about a couple of months ago, or maybe it was about a month ago. If you'll remember Global Strategies Group, they're a big Democratic consulting firm that helped Amazon try, unsuccessfully, to bust the Amazon labor union in New York on Staten Island. And it turns out politicians are not their only clients. From an article in The Lever, in addition to its Democratic clients, the firm has also worked for a number of labor unions in recent years, including the National Education Association, the International Brotherhood of Carpenters, the Actors and Artistes of the AFL-CIO, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Local 98 in Philadelphia, the SEIU Local 775 in Washington State, and the American Federation of School Supervisors Local 1 in New York, according to Department of Labor records and federal campaign finance reports. The Lever contacted all those unions to ask whether GSG's work with Amazon would affect their relationship going forward, and none responded. However, CNBC also reached out to these groups. CNBC reached out to a dozen politicians and PACs listed as clients of GSG in filings with the Federal Election Commission, and none of the elected officials provided CNBC a comment. Of the labor groups, though, one of them, the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners, said that it will continue to work with the Global Strategies Group.
Wow. That's very disappointing.
That is unacceptable. That is absolutely unacceptable. If you know any carpenters, or if you're a carpenter, especially if you're a carpenter, you need to contact your international, because that's unacceptable. I mean, that's like, you just simply can't do that. That's just totally beyond the pale. You cannot be using firms that make their money busting up unions. You can't do that. And let's be honest, it's not like they're the only game in town, right? There are dozens of these insane groups that would be willing to steal your money for giving you nothing of value. Like, if you really want to just flush money down the drain for worthless DC consulting firms, if you're just dead set on doing that, there are plenty of them out there, and you don't have to use ones that actively oppose your brothers and sisters that are trying to get the same benefits that you have through your union. If you're dead set on flushing your money down the toilet, do it with someone else. Totally unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. But that's going to be it. That's going to be it for us today. We appreciate your time. If you'd like to help us stay on the air, you can buy our new hat. Adam, let's throw that hat up on the stream as we're closing out. You can buy our new hat. Like I said at the beginning of the show, the print shop should have the delivery today, Saturday the 23rd. So hopefully it will be shipped by the print shop next week. So if you want it to be shipped to you next week, then go ahead and place your order tonight. You can do that on TVLR.fm or make a one-time or recurring donation on our website as well to help us stay on the air. Our listeners are our number one source of funding. Make sure that you like and subscribe on YouTube. If you haven't, you give us a rating on the podcast feed. If you haven't, you share our stuff, you follow it, all that good stuff. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, then you can do that as well. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. That is going to be it for us this week. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. And we'll see you next week when we're talking to Kim Kelly about her book. Really exciting. Really going to be a great interview. So make sure you tune in for next week's show. We'll see you then.